Chapter 1675. Chu Ning and Chu Luiyue glanced at each other. Chu Luiyue released his hand and asked, "Do you know what's going on?" Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. "I'm not sure yet." As he spoke, Chu Ning had already extended his hand. Rong Xiu's well-defined fingers rested on his wrist. The surroundings were silent. Rong Xiu separated a portion of his force and injected it into Chu Ning's body. This force was like a stone thrown into a deep well, quickly disappearing in Chu Ning's body. Rong Xiu's brows moved slightly as he looked up at Chu Ning. "Lord Chu Ning, your current martial artist rank is..." Chu Ning's expression dimmed. "Some time ago, I was seriously injured and my pill of origin was almost destroyed. My martial artist rank also fell back to rank 1. Now, I'm no different from a useless person." Ever since he was brought away from the empire of Yaochun, he had seen countless powerhouses. From then on, he knew that his little bit of strength was actually not enough in the outside world. Under such circumstances, he was unexpectedly seriously injured and became a rank 1 martial artist. He felt very embarrassed when he said it. Yuer had grown so well now, but Chu Luiyue frowned. Fell back to rank 1. Daddy must have encountered an extremely dangerous situation before. Could it be that something happened that caused his body to become like this? To be able to recover so quickly? It seems that he's not an ordinary rank 1 martial artist. Rong Xiu released his hand and paused for a moment before asking again. "Can you display a god territory now?" Chu Luiyue was shocked and his eyes widened slightly. Why did Rong Xiu suddenly ask this? Daddy has already fallen back to rank 1 martial artist. How can he have a god territory? However, Chu Ning did not immediately deny it. Instead, he frowned slightly and asked with some uncertainty. "Like, the ones that you were summoned before?" Rong Xiu nodded, "Yes." After a moment of silence, Chu Ning actually nodded. "I think there have been 2. But at that time, I didn't know what it was, and it soon disappeared again." As he spoke, he hesitantly raised his hand. A streak of azure light slowly flew out. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. This was actually a divine domain. Even though she had seen many storms and waves, when she saw this scene at this time, she was still shocked on the spot and was unable to recover for a long time. Just a second ago, she was still immersed in the sad atmosphere of her father falling back to a rank 1 warrior. And in the blink of an eye, she saw him summoning a divine territory. Who would be able to endure such a drop in status? Chu Luiyue forcefully closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the divine domain was still lingering around Chu Ning and had not disappeared. Her throat tightened as she struggled to speak. This is, Father, your divine domain?" Chu Luiyue's voice was floating when she said these few words. Chu Ning nodded. "Previously, I didn't know what this was. It was only when I saw you fight with that person today that I found out that this was the divine region." Chu Ning really didn't know anything about this. When his strength reached its peak in the past, he was only a rank 5 warrior in the empire of Yaochun. And this strength was definitely considered top-notch in the entire empire of Yaochun. However, a divine domain could only be obtained after breaking through a rank 9 warrior and successfully becoming a god-rank powerhouse. How did he have the chance to know this? At most, he had only seen this term a few times in some biographies. However, to him, those were things that were extremely far away. He would never have thought that one day, he would actually possess a divine domain, especially since his current strength was only at the first stage of the warrior realm. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes today, he would never have thought of himself. Looking at Chu Ning's blank face, Chu Luiyue was speechless. She suddenly felt that she was really not enough in front of her father. What was the big deal about being able to fight above his level? What was the big deal about being able to contract with a divine beast? Her father had become a rank 1 warrior and had a divine domain. What kind of operation was this? Chu Luiyue really didn't understand. In the past, it was only others who called her a pervert. Now she felt that compared to her father, she was really inferior. Sensing the strange gazes of the few people, Chu Ning felt a little awkward. Actually, I don't know what's going on either. It's just that after I was injured that time, when I woke up again, it became like this. At that time, He was still sad for a long time because of the fall in his strength, and didn't think about what this thing was at all. As expected, Rongxiu's face revealed a look of relief as his thin lips curled up slightly. I still have to congratulate Lord Chu Ning for obtaining such an opportunity. Opportunity? Chu Luyue and Chu Ning asked in unison. Rongxiu nodded. If I'm not wrong, Lord Chu Ning should have obtained the indestructible divine body by chance. Chu Luyue was shocked. Indestructible divine body. She had heard of this before. A few years ago at Lingxiao College, after she broke through to the divine level, she had been thinking about condensing a divine body. However, this matter was very complicated. Many divine level powerhouses, even after crossing the threshold of the divine level, could not condense their own divine body in their lifetime. At that time, she didn't know what kind of divine body was most suitable for her, so she searched through Lingxiao College's library. She remembered that in an ancient scroll, there was a record of this divine body. The so-called indestructible divine body was an extremely special divine body. For ordinary cultivators, their original body and divine body were separated. However, cultivators with the indestructible divine body could directly change their own body into a divine body. In other words, such cultivators would only have one body from the beginning to the end. Compared to other cultivators who could separate divine bodies, this was indeed a disadvantage. However, the indestructible divine body had an incomparable advantage. This divine body had extremely tenacious vitality. As long as there was still a breath left, it could quickly recover. Chu Liyue looked at Chu Ning. Previously, he had so many terrible wounds on his body, and they were serious. However, in this short period of time, those wounds had completely healed, and even a scar was hard to see. This was the indestructible divine body. But father is only a stage 1 warrior now, how could? Rongxiu smiled and explained. Lord Chu Ning did not break through on his own, but he accidentally obtained some kind of opportunity and obtained the indestructible divine body. His original strength was not compatible with this. So I think that when he obtained the indestructible divine body, he automatically lowered his strength to that of a stage 1 warrior to make it easier for him to cultivate again. Also, Lord Chu Ning's Yuan Meridian level has been changed to the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Rongxiu raised his chin as he spoke. You can check his pulse yourself. Chu Liyue actually believed his words, but she still could not help but go forward and check Chu Ning's pulse. After a moment, she released her hand with a shocked expression. When she looked at Chu Ning again, her gaze was very different from before. It really is the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1676. Chu Ning was stunned for a moment before he asked with uncertainty. Does this mean that I can continue to cultivate? Chu Liyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Father, you can't just continue to cultivate. You've completely changed your fate. One had to know that even she hadn't forged her own divine body yet. She didn't expect her father to beat her to it. And it was such a precious and rare divine body. So what if he was a stage 1 warrior now? With the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, was there a need to worry about cultivation? After going in a big circle, it turned out to be a joyous occasion. Chu Ning saw that she was happy and smiled. So father can continue to help Yuer in the future? He had always been worried that he would become Yuer's burden. He didn't expect that the heavens would always leave a way out. Chu Liyue was excited and touched. After knowing that he had the indestructible divine body, the first person her father thought of was still her. She took a deep breath and said, I just want father to be well. Nothing else is important. She was really tormented during the time he was missing. She worried day and night, thinking about how to save him as soon as possible. When she thought about what kind of torture he would suffer, she was incomparably anxious. Chu Ning patted her head with heartache. Silly Yuer. Now that she had become so powerful, if he could only become her burden by staying by her side, it would be better to end it once and for all. Now he could finally put down this worry. After confirming this matter, the atmosphere suddenly became much more relaxed. Chu Ning also had a long-lost smile on his face. The few of them continued to walk forward. As they walked, Chu Liyue asked some relevant questions. She really wanted to know what her father had gone through for him to have such a fortuitous encounter. Unfortunately, Chu Ning himself wasn't very clear. During the long period of being detained, he moved from place to place, but he never knew where he was. In addition, he had been suffering a lot of pain and suffering, and most of the time he was in a daze, so he couldn't remember many things clearly. Although he had experienced several life and death situations, he never cared. The only belief in his mind was to live on and see you. In addition, he didn't understand many things. Even if it happened to him, he didn't know. For example, his Yuan meridian and his God domain. At the end of the conversation, Chu Liyue could only vaguely guess that his father had obtained the indestructible divine body by chance in the Godslayer mound. Also, it was the time when all the people from Jun Jiuqing were wiped out, and he lost contact with his father. Chu Liyue could only sigh. The truth was indeed unpredictable. At that time, how could she have imagined that her father would have such a fortuitous encounter? The indestructible divine body might be related to some expert who died in the god-slaying mound. Rong Xiu said. Chu Liyue thought about it and felt that this was the most likely guess. However, didn't they say that in the battle back then, all the experts were annihilated, leaving nothing behind? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Those are just rumors after all. As for what the truth was, other than the people from back then, no one should know. Chu Liyue thought about it and agreed. In the past, countless experts had died in the Dahuang swamp. People who came later to obtain the inheritance almost came one after another. It didn't make sense that there was nothing in the god-slaying mound. Not to mention the others, didn't she get a lot of stones alone? Of course, they were very useful stones. And her father even had the indestructible divine body. Chu Liyue didn't believe that this was really a barren land. Maybe someone didn't want others to come here to snatch the treasures, so they spread the news? Chu Liyue guessed. Didn't those people say that they were looking for something here? What else could they be doing other than looking for treasures? Rong Xiu looked at her with appreciation. Some things didn't need to be said. She always understood. The god-slaying mound is extremely dangerous, and the evil spirit lingers for a long time. Most of the people who came in didn't return. Even those who knew there were treasures here didn't dare to act rashly. And those who didn't know wouldn't come either. That was why this place was so quiet. Chu Liyue nodded. The treasures were good, but they needed to be alive to get them. But even if they couldn't get it now, it was a good idea to spread the news and reduce the curiosity and interest of the people. These people were really. Chu Liyue shook her head. I think this place. She hesitated for a moment, but didn't finish her sentence. She changed the topic. When we find Taizu, we'll leave this place. Originally, they had only come here to save their father. It would be best if he could leave safely after he was done with the matter. Chu Ning paused and asked. You are this Taizu, is he? Chu Liyue smiled. She was so busy asking her father that she didn't have time to tell him about her own things. I'll tell you slowly. At this moment, Chu Liyue was telling Chu Ning about her background and experiences. On the other hand, Nan Yuxing and the others were not in a good mood. The atmosphere was cold and stagnant. Nan Yuxing frowned tightly. Elder Wu Peng, are you serious about what you just said? That thing is not here now. Elder Wu Peng looked at Nan Yi with a cold and solemn expression. Second Miss also has a certain sense of that thing, don't you think? Nan Yi's face turned ugly. It's indeed not here. Strange. I clearly felt it before. Why is it suddenly gone now? Elder Baitong couldn't help but ask. You mean, that thing moved on its own? Digression. Tomorrow afternoon, please browse and read together. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1677. I don't think so. Nan Yi furrowed her brows, but her tone was uncertain. Father didn't mention this before. She thought that they would just make a trip here and casually find that thing and take it away. After all, there were very few people in the world who could find the traces of that thing. Who knew that it would be so troublesome? Now that they have been searching for so long, they didn't even see a shadow. But that thing is not an ordinary item after all. Perhaps it has really changed places. As Elder Wu Peng spoke, he looked at Nan Yi. Second Miss, can you investigate more carefully and see if you can find any clues? He should have been the one to do this, but he had just used the great star compass not long ago. He couldn't use it a second time in such a short time. Thus, he could only place his hopes on Nanny. Nanny pursed her lips. I'll try. The reason why her father insisted on letting her come was because she had a certain talent in this area. Now it came in handy. However, every time she sensed something like this, her strength and mental strength would be greatly depleted. After that, she would feel very uncomfortable for a long time. So she usually didn't like to do this. But there was no other way now. Nanny closed her eyes and made a strange gesture with her hands in front of her. Then, a totem vaguely appeared between her brows. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes and pointed in a certain direction. Over there. Nan Yuxing looked satisfied. He is indeed amazing. Nanny couldn't help but look smug when she heard this. Of course, although she was a little willful, she was still capable. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been doted on for so many years. After all, this was a world where strength was respected. Since we've confirmed the direction, let's go now. As Nan Yuxing spoke, he eagerly prepared to move forward. He really wanted to find that thing immediately and leave this place. However, Elder Baitong and Elder Wu Peng didn't move. Furthermore, the two of them had strange expressions on their faces. Nan Yuxing couldn't help but frown. Elders, why aren't you leaving? The two of them looked at each other and saw the complicated expression in each other's eyes. Elder Baitong said slowly, Eldest young master, don't you realize that something is wrong? Nan Yuxing was confused. Something was wrong. What was wrong with that? Hadn't he already sensed it? This proved that the thing was nearby. Elder Wu Peng said in a deep voice. The direction that second young mistress pointed to was the direction that Rong Xiao and the others left. Nan Yuxing was suddenly at a loss for words. His first reaction was to look at Nan Yi, his eyes filled with suspicion. Even though he didn't ask anything, the look in his eyes spoke volumes. Nanny instantly felt aggrieved. Brother, what do you mean by that? Are you doubting me? It took me a lot of effort to sense that weak aura. When Nan Yuxing saw how angry she was, he immediately dispelled the suspicion in his heart. No, big brother just feels that it's a bit too much of a coincidence. Although his sister was a little willful and arrogant, she didn't have the guts to be impudent in such matters. If she didn't do it on purpose, does that mean that thing really moved in that direction? The thought of Rong Xiao and the others in front of him made Nan Yuxing feel uncomfortable. Of all places, why did it have to go there? Elder Wu Peng didn't doubt Nanny's judgment, but this matter still alerted him. Eldest young master, second young mistress, don't you think that ever since we came here, this series of events is indeed too much of a coincidence? Previously, I used the Star Catcher Great Plate to deduce the direction it pointed to. At that time, Rong Xiao and the others were here. Now that they've left, second young mistress sensed that the thing is also in the direction they left. Wu Peng, do you mean that that thing has been following Rong Xiao and the others? Elder Baitong's pupils constricted. Or is it actually with them? The moment he said this, the few of them fell into dead silence. Without a doubt, this was the outcome they didn't want to see. That's impossible, right? Nanny was also a little flustered. How can there be no movement at all if they want to subdue that thing? Besides, they've only been here for such a short time. How could they do it? Before coming, her father was worried that she wouldn't be able to handle it alone. So he asked her big brother and the two elders to accompany her. He also repeatedly instructed her that even if she would suffer a little during the process, she had to persevere until she brought the thing back intact. But what was going on now? Elder Wu Peng pondered for a moment and finally said, No matter what, I'm afraid we have to keep up with them first. If everything is just a misunderstanding, then it's easy to deal with. If it's really them, he didn't need to say the rest, and the few of them knew what he meant. At that time, a fierce battle would be inevitable. I think they're very vigilant. We have to be careful. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't face them head-on. Elder Baitong thought about it for a long time before he decided to say these words. Seeing that Nan Yuxing's expression was getting uglier, he quickly added, After all, our main goal this time is to find that thing. Everything else can be put aside for the time being. Nan Yuxing clenched his fists. Let's go. Chu Luyue revealed her true identity and told Chu Ning a lot of things that happened after they parted. Even though she had already made it brief enough, Chu Ning was still shocked to the core when he heard it. The princess of the Tianling dynasty, the last disciple of the dean of Lingxiao College, a high god expert who was less than 20 years old. All of this came out of Chu Luyue's mouth extremely casually. But Chu Ning knew that behind these seemingly calm words, there were countless stormy waves. He had long guessed that her identity was extraordinary, but when he heard it for himself, he was still deeply shocked. And Rong Xiu's true identity made him unable to calm down for a long time. The son of Saint of the Yuntian Tower, a peerless genius who was no weaker than you. What surprised him the most was that he had already fallen in love with you, a few years ago. No wonder he took good care of you, from the beginning. After Chu Luyue finished speaking, Chu Ning took a long time to digest all the information. So the person we are looking for now is your real Taizu? Chu Luyue nodded slightly. Taizu has always taken good care of me. This time, he insisted on coming with me because he was worried about me. But not long after we came in, we got separated. Hearing that he was someone who treated you well, Chu Ning immediately became worried. This is extremely dangerous. Do you have any way of contacting him? Chu Luyue smiled and comforted. Don't worry. Taizu has been here before, so there shouldn't be. Boom! A loud sound suddenly came from the distant sky. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1678. Chu Luyue's voice stopped abruptly, and she quickly looked up. It was evening, and the sun was setting in the west. The last arc was gradually hidden in the thick clouds. The sky was filled with a warm orange color, as if the whole sky was plated with a layer of gold. In the god-slaying tomb, such a bright and brilliant scene was extremely rare. However, below that, the place where the sky and the earth met was covered by a faint shadow. Even the afterglow of the sun could not penetrate it. From afar, it looked like a piece of black that had been stagnant for a long time, with a kind of cold and lonely aura. Gradually, Chu Luyue found that the piece of black seemed to be expanding, and the loud sound just now seemed to have come from that place. However, it didn't sound like thunder. At such a distance, it was faint and could not be heard clearly. What is that? Chu Luyue frowned slightly. This aura was really not right. Chu Ning suddenly said, That's a wall. Chu Luyue was stunned and turned to look at him. A wall? Chu Ning nodded, his eyes fixed on the piece of black in the distance, his face solemn. Yes, I have seen this wall twice before, and this is the third time. As he spoke, Chu Ning raised his hand and pointed to the left and right sides of the piece of black. This wall will spread from one end to the other, and in a quarter of an hour, it will occupy the entire horizon, as far as we can see. Chu Luyue looked in the direction of his finger, and found that the piece of black was indeed spreading rapidly to both sides. At this time, she could vaguely see that it was indeed a wall. It was completely black, solemn and majestic, and unapproachable. Before she got close, she seemed to be able to feel the murderous aura on it. She frowned secretly. Such a strong aura would not appear for no reason. Father, how often does this wall appear? Did it suddenly appear like this the last 2 times? Chu Ning shook his head. It doesn't appear at a fixed time. So far, I have only seen it 3 times. And before, my physical and mental state was not very good, so I did not pay much attention to it. I only know that each time, it appears at sunset and disappears at dawn. It never appears during the day. He paused for a moment before he added, When I first saw this wall, I had just been exiled here. At that time, I thought that I could leave this place by crossing the wall, so I tried my best to go there. But before I reached it, it was already dawn, and it disappeared directly. Later, I knew that it had nothing to do with whether I could get out or not, so I did not pay attention to it. Chu Luyue nodded, looking at a mountain, although from here, the wall did not seem to be very far. But if they really wanted to walk to it, it would a lot of effort. However, why would a wall suddenly appear out of nowhere in this place? There were too many strange things in this god-slaying mound. Just as she was about to wait and see, A stone suddenly jumped out of the ring of cosmos and rolled to Chu Liyue's feet. Chu Liyue lowered her head. The stone rolled forward a little. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows high, but her feet did not move. Soon, the second stone jumped out, also touched her feet, and then rolled forward. This time, it went farther than the previous one, but in the same direction, toward the wall in the sky. When the third stone jumped out, Chu Liyue finally spoke. "You want me to go there?" The stone could not speak, but this series of actions could not be more obvious. Chu Liyue touched her chin. She knew that they would not harm her. Since they were so eager to urge her to go there should be a reason. Seeing this scene, Chu Ning's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. In fact, he had heard Chu Liyue briefly mention the origin of these stones before. And in the battle between Chu Liyue and the black-robed man, he had seen clearly the amazing power contained in these stones. But at this time, when he saw it again, he could not help but feel strange. "It seems that they really want you to go there," Rong Xiu said with a slight smile. Chu Liyue spread her hands and smiled helplessly. "I can see that too. But it is really far away, and I can't sense anything now. In this place, the unknown often means danger. If it is really dangerous, we can retreat when the time comes. Since we can see this wall, Senior Shengguan should be able to see it too. Perhaps he will appear there and wait to meet up with us." Rong Xiu's words made Chu Liyue's eyes light up. Right. She had almost forgotten this point. The boundless wilderness was vast and boundless. At a glance, all the scenery was the same. Without experience, it would be difficult to even distinguish the direction here, let alone find a person. That was indeed no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. If Taizu was safe and sound, it was very likely that they would do that. Chu Liyue made up her mind. Then let's go take a look first. If they could arrive before dawn and find Taizu, that would be the best. If not, they would find another way. Chu Liyue did not dare to have too much hope. That was because the wall on the horizon was still spreading to both sides. The more so it was, the wider it covered, and the slimmer the chance of successfully meeting up with Taizu. However, even if there was only a glimmer of hope, Chu Liyue was unwilling to give up. She put away the stone and walked forward. At the same time, Shengguan Jing was also walking towards the wall. He had been walking for a long time, and had consumed a lot of his god conduit power. But he had only shortened a portion of the distance. He clearly felt that the wall was in front of him, but he could not touch it. Fortunately, it was not his first time here, nor was it his first time encountering such a situation. So his emotions were very stable. He just kept moving forward. Calculating the time, Yuer and the others should have seen the wall by now. It was just that he did not know if they were on his side or on the opposite side. If they were on the same side, it would be fine. But if they were on the opposite side, it would be extremely difficult to see them. Shengguan Jing stopped in his tracks and took a deep breath. After calming down a little, he continued to move forward. The last ray of light gradually dissipated. Dusk finally fell. In the dark, one's eyesight would often become very poor, especially on such a starless and moonless night. However, the miraculous thing was that Chu Liyue could still see the black wall clearly. It was a different kind of black. It was rich, solemn, serious, and unattainable. It stood quietly between heaven and earth, as if it had existed for tens of thousands of years. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1679. This was a very subtle feeling that couldn't be described in words. But as long as one looked up and saw the thick black, one would unconsciously feel this way. Gradually, Chu Liyue's worried heart calmed down. There seemed to be an invisible force that made her feel inexplicably at ease. Noticing this, Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. Strange, this feeling was really strange. Originally, she was a little repulsed and uneasy to get close to the wall. But now the closer she got, the calmer she became. In fact, there was even a faint sense of familiarity. She didn't know where this feeling came from, but she didn't reject it. Could it be? Was it because of the stones she collected before? After all, they had been here for tens of thousands of years, so they should be very familiar with everything here. But Chu Liyue still felt that something was wrong. She felt that she seemed to have overlooked something important, but she couldn't remember it for a while. These messy thoughts kept flashing in Chu Liyue's mind. But she didn't stop walking. At a certain moment, Chu Liyue finally noticed that there was a slight change in the void in front of her. She stopped in her tracks and reached out her hand. With her finger as the center, several ripples spread out in all directions. "This is a boundary," Chu Liyue said with certainty. Moreover, the pressure on it didn't seem weak. Because it was transparent and at night, it was even harder to detect. She only felt that something was wrong when she got close. But this boundary didn't seem to be a threat. Rongxiu took her hand and waved his sleeve, and the boundary in front of them instantly dispersed. He walked in front, raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled carelessly. Maybe it's the collision of the many forces left in the god-slaying mound, and the turbulence of the void surged, inadvertently forming a boundary. It's nothing to worry about. Chu Liyue nodded in agreement. Wasn't Taizu swept away by a turbulence of the void? Here, the forces accumulated for tens of thousands of years were constantly intertwined, so it was normal for such a situation to occur. Moreover, she didn't sense any threat from the boundary. She quickly put this matter behind her and continued to walk forward. Around half an hour after they left, a few more figures showed up at the same place. It was Nan Yuxing and the others. They didn't look good, especially Elder Baitong, whose face was particularly pale. His calf was cut off, and now he could only walk with one leg. Along the way, he was undoubtedly the one who had suffered the most. Even though he had used top-notch medicinal pills to keep himself alive, his injuries were too severe. Moreover, it was impossible for him to regrow half of his calf in a short period of time. Suffering was unavoidable. Elder Wu Peng glanced at him and said, "Why don't we take a break?" "No." Elder Baitong hurriedly rejected this suggestion with a guilty expression. "They're not slow. Because of me, we've already lagged behind for a while. If we rest now, I'm afraid we'll be delayed even more." Elder Wu Peng frowned, but he had to admit that what he said was the truth. What are they planning to do? It's so late at night. Are they going to keep walking without resting? Nan Yuxing was also very dissatisfied. Although his injuries were lighter than Elder Baitong's, he really couldn't take it anymore. At first, they were worried that they would be discovered by Rongxiu and the others if they got too close. But later they realized that they were thinking too much, because with their current speed, it was already very difficult for them to not lose them. How could they care about anything else? What was even more hateful was that at this time, those people still didn't stop. Who could stand it if this continued? Elder Wu Peng looked at Nanny. "Second miss, what's the result of your investigation?" Nanny pursed her lips. That thing has indeed been following them. At this point, it was almost certain that the thing was with them, although it sounded unbelievable. But Nanny had followed them all the way, so it was impossible for her to be wrong. This also meant that they had to catch up with Rongxiu and the others, and take the opportunity to take back the thing. If they were at their peak, it might not be too much of a problem, but the key was now. Even if they joined forces, they probably wouldn't be a match for Rongxiu and the others. Nanny paced back and forth in frustration. "If I had known this would happen, I would have asked Father to send more people over." Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly felt her body become heavy, as if a heavy object was pressing down on her shoulders. Her low exclamation immediately attracted the attention of the few people. Second miss." Nanny gritted her teeth and barely managed to stand firm. She then looked up in panic and looked around. Several ripples gently spread out, as if forming a huge cage, trapping her within. No, it wasn't just her. Elder Wu Peng and the others were also included in this range. "This is a barrier," Elder Wu Peng shouted in a deep voice. At the same time, he waved his sleeves, wanting to bring Nanny out. However, the surrounding space became heavy and stagnant, and every movement became incomparably difficult. The moment he moved, it was as if there were countless invisible hands pulling him crazily, trapping him in place. Elder Wu Peng knew that something was wrong. He quickly mobilized the force in his body, but it was still in vain. Nan Yuxing and Elder Baitong were also trapped. They were trapped in this strange barrier just like that. Every step forward became extremely difficult. What's going on? Nan Yuxing was anxious and panicked. When Rong Xiao and the others passed by just now, everything was normal. Such a situation didn't happen at all. Elder Wu Peng gritted his teeth and said, "The surrounding energy of heaven and earth is chaotic, causing this situation. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to break free for a while." Even he couldn't break free? Nan Yuxing's heart sank. Then why do Rong Xiao and the others seem to be fine? They had seen those people pass through here with their own eyes. Elder Wu Peng's face was solemn, and his brows were tightly knitted. How could he not want to know why? Along the way, he had been walking at the front and saw the clearest. But from the beginning to the end, he didn't notice anything unusual. Who knew that there would be such a big problem here? He looked up and secretly gritted his teeth. This situation won't create any danger, but it will greatly slow down our speed. This time, I'm afraid we won't be able to catch up. How can this be? Nan Yuxing was anxious. Don't forget that it's very likely that that thing is in their hands. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1680. Nanny suddenly said, "Why don't we ask Uncle Luo Yin to come over?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the room fell silent. Nan Yuxing asked hesitantly, I'm afraid it's not very appropriate, right? Uncle Luo Yin usually focuses on cultivation and never gets involved in the matters of the clan. Besides, this time, Father's original intention was to train you more. Only when you personally bring that thing back can you get the approval of everyone in the clan. If we let Uncle Luo Yin off, when we go back, there will be some people whispering. Then do we have any other way now? Nanny was also full of anger, and her attitude became more and more impatient. She didn't want to make this trip in the first place, and now she had suffered so much. Actually, it was just a matter that her father could solve by sending a few more people over. Why did he have to make it so troublesome? Do we have to all get into trouble here before we can let this matter rest? Second miss. These words are inauspicious, and you can't say them carelessly. Elder Bai Tong hurriedly said. You and eldest young master will definitely be successful. Nanny turned her face away and sneered in her heart. Now that the situation was like this, what was there to talk about? Whether they could return safely was a big problem. Nan Yuxing's face was tense, and he hesitated for a long time. Actually, he also knew that the current situation was almost a hopeless situation. If they didn't find someone, they might really not be able to complete the mission and return. However, inviting Uncle Luo Yin over was a little inappropriate. Big brother. Uncle Luo Yin has always doted on me the most. I'm asking him to save me, not to help me find that thing. Can I do that? Nanny's words finally made Nan Yuxing relent. Okay. It was already late at night. The wilderness was dark and terrifyingly silent. Only the sound of the wind kept brushing past their ears, bringing with it a hint of coldness. Chu Luwa finally stopped in her tracks. She first turned around to take a look. It was quiet and there was no one around. She had finally gotten rid of those annoying shadows. She didn't know what Nan Yuxing and the others were thinking, but they seemed to be sticking to them along the way. At first, she thought she was overthinking, but later she realized that they were indeed tailing them. Although they had been very careful, Chu Luiwe was carrying so many stones on his body. He was very sensitive to his surroundings, so how could he not notice them? It was just that she wanted to find Taizu first, so she couldn't be bothered with them. Fortunately, she was in the right place at the right time. She used some tricks and successfully shook them off. Chu Luiwe let out a sigh of relief, as he finally had some peace and quiet. Then he retracted his gaze and looked forward. At that moment, they were only 100 zhang away from the wall. Standing there, he could already see the rough appearance of the wall. Solemn, dignified, simple and bloody. After taking a look, these words instantly surfaced in Chu Liyue's mind. Huge black stone bricks were piled up in a neat and orderly manner. Even though it had been eroded by the passage of time, and was mottled, it was not difficult to see the grandeur of the past. The wall was very high. When Chu Liyue looked up, she could barely see the top. At a glance, it was as if the wall was connected to the sky. Moreover, the wall extended to the left and right. It was a long road with no end in sight. Chu Luiyue and the others stood there, as small as ants. Why is there such a wall in the god-slaying tomb? Chu Luiyue murmured, frowning slightly. Also, this place is filled with a strong murderous aura. It was the place with the most terrifying murderous aura ever since she entered the god-slaying tomb. Standing so far away, she could feel the terrifying murderous aura coming at her, almost tearing her apart. This wall was left behind in the shocking battle back then, Suke said. He suddenly spoke. His voice was cold and calm, as if he was telling a distant story in a yellowed ancient book, with a trace of obscurity. Chu Luiyue turned around. You're saying, this wall has been around since then? Rongxiu nodded, looking at her eyes full of curiosity. His thin lips curved into a faint smile. It is said that the two sides didn't want to fight to the death back then, so they agreed to divide and conquer. Unfortunately, the battle still broke out later. The location of this wall became a very famous place, where the battle was fought to the death back then. I see. Chu Luiyue nodded. No wonder the wall was so imposing and filled with a strong murderous aura. It was indeed related to the battle back then. Speaking of this, she was even more curious. To be able to attract so many strong people to gather here, and die one after another, is it really just because of a book? Rongxiu lowered his eyes slightly. It is normal for people to die for wealth, and birds to die for food. Chu Luiyue touched her chin. Then who won in the end? And whose hands did the book fall into? Rongxiu shook his head. I heard that the casualties on both sides were shocking. But who got the book in the end has become an eternal secret. Chu Luiyue felt a little regretful when she heard this. But after all, this was something that happened tens of thousands of years ago, and the descendants indeed had no way to know. She put away her thoughts, turned her wrist, and took out the long yuan sword. Although she didn't use the long yuan sword much now, Taizu had been here for thousands of years, and had left his aura long ago. Now it was convenient for her to find him. Chu Luiyue held her breath, and began to carefully check the surroundings. She didn't find anything. She was not discouraged. As she walked forward, she kept trying to find Taizu's trace. It was not easy to find a person in such a big place. Even if Taizu also saw the wall and came here, he might not be in the same place, and at the same time as them. After a while, Chu Luiyue thought of something, and released those stones from the ring of cosmos. These stones rolled in all directions. After all, they were objects that had existed here for tens of thousands of years. With them, Chu Luiyue could undoubtedly expand her range of perception again. After a while, a low sound of a string suddenly came into her ears. Chu Luiyue was startled, and looked up subconsciously. The sound seemed to be coming from that wall. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1681. Chu Luiyue took a few steps forward, but the sound was still very far away, as if it came from a very far place, faintly discernible. It was like a feather gently brushing across her heart, tickling her. Chu Luiyue stepped forward again, her eyes fixed on the black wall. Seeing her actions and expression, Chu Ning suddenly asked, what are you doing? Chu Luiyue was stunned, and came back to her senses. Looking at Chu Ning's expression, she suddenly realized something. Father, didn't you hear anything? Chu Ning was at a loss. What sound? I didn't hear anything. Chu Luiyue frowned. Come closer and listen more carefully. Chu Ning walked over and stood beside her, listening attentively. After a moment he still shook his head. No, he didn't hear anything. Chu Luiyue suddenly had a subtle feeling in her heart. Was it because her father was only a stage 1 warrior, and his hearing wasn't as good as hers, so he couldn't hear it? She looked at Rongxiu. The two of them looked at each other. Rongxiu asked, what did you hear? Chu Luiyue's heart sank slightly. You can't hear it either? Rongxiu nodded. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. It would be fine if her father couldn't hear it alone. But now, even Rongxiu, who was stronger, couldn't hear it. Was she really the only one who could hear it? She closed her eyes to make sure it wasn't an illusion. Although the sound was low and indistinct, it was real. She paused for a moment before saying, I heard it. It sounded like someone was playing the zither. The sound was pleasant and moved one's heart. The rhythm was light and slow, but it was very captivating. That sound came from inside the wall, Chu Liyue said and walked forward. The closer she got to the wall, the more intense and crazy the murderous aura was. But perhaps because of the stones, Chu Liyue didn't feel too uncomfortable. She quickly adapted to the environment. Chu Ning and Rong Xiu followed. Rong Xiu was fine, but Chu Ning's face quickly turned pale. Although he now had the indestructible divine body, his strength as a martial artist was indeed only at rank 1. This point was irrefutable. Apart from having an advantage in terms of divine body, there was still a big gap between him and ordinary high gods in other aspects. Chu Liyue said, "Father, you don't need to come over. I went back after I figured out what was going on with this thing. Tuanzi, you go and keep her company." Tuanzi nodded obediently and ran to Chu Ning's side, holding his hand. "Grandpa Chu, I'm coming." Chu Ning already knew Dumpling's true identity, but every time he saw her cute little face, he would forget about it. Only love and affection were left in his eyes. He hurriedly said, "Ah, good, good. Dumpling is the most obedient." He patted Dumpling's head gently. He liked it very much, but on second thought he said, "Grandpa Chu is fine. Grandpa Chu is fine. Tuanzi, you'd better go to Yuer." He felt that the closer they were to the wall, the more dangerous it was. And said that she heard something. He couldn't help but worry. Tuanzi opened her mouth and smiled brightly. "It's fine. His Highness is with Ayu." Rong Xiu stopped in his tracks. His thin lips curled into a satisfied smile. This child is teachable. Chu Ning heard this and felt that it made sense. He also nodded. Holding Dumpling's little hand, they waited together. Chu Liyue finally stopped in front of the wall. Standing close to it, all the marks on the wall could be seen clearly. Countless knife and sword marks had gradually blurred over the years. Only deep and shallow marks were left, mottled and intertwined. She could even smell a faint smell of blood. Mixed with wind, frost and dust, it inexplicably carried a sense of desolation and tragedy. Chu Liyue's mood also became heavy. She stared in front of her in a daze. Countless emotions seemed to surge in her heart, but she couldn't describe the specifics. He could only allow these complicated emotions to continuously surge in his chest and abdomen. She stretched out her hand and slowly placed it on the wall. It was cold, rough, and heavy to the touch. However, the sound of the zither suddenly became clear. Down, down, down. It all fell into her ears and smashed into her heart. In the dark, she seemed to see a figure standing alone in the lonely and cold wilderness. She couldn't see the figure and appearance of the person clearly. She didn't even know whether the person was a man or a woman. She only saw the person holding the zither in his arms and gently plucking the strings with his fingers. And the sound of the zither flew out from under the person's hand. The sound of the zither, which was supposed to be light and cheerful, inexplicably carried a trace of desolation. The world was dark, and the wind and clouds moved. In the emptiness, there was only one person accompanied by the zither. Time passed slowly. The speed of the person's fingers plucking the strings gradually increased. The originally boundless and distant sound was suddenly tainted with a trace of killing intent. The sound of the zither clanged. In an instant, the world seemed to change color. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly felt as if it was tightly gripped by something. The sound of the zither became more urgent. In an instant, it was as if she saw the shadows of knives and swords, and blood splattered everywhere. Chu Liyue suddenly felt a sweet and fishy taste in her mouth. Rong Xiu's clear and low voice suddenly echoed in her ears. She suddenly came back to her senses. Rong Xiu had already grabbed her hand and retreated from the wall. Clang! The sound of the zither stopped. Everything disappeared without a trace. Chu Liyue's body trembled, and she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Digression. Today is the winter solstice, eating dumplings or glutinous rice balls. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1682. Ayu. Chu Ning and Dumpling were both shocked. Chu Liyue didn't look any different before, so no one expected her to vomit blood all of a sudden. Chu Liyue shook her head. "I'm fine. Rong Xiao took out a snow-white handkerchief and helped her wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. At the same time, he injected his force into Chu Liyue's body to help her sort out the violent force. Rong Xiao only withdrew his force when her breath gradually calmed down, but he didn't let go of her hand. Chu Liyue held his hand and gave him a reassuring look. I'm really fine. It's just that I wasn't paying attention just now, so the force in my body went berserk. But fortunately, Rong Xiao acted in time and stopped the movement before it could cause a commotion. Although she vomited blood, her body wasn't affected too much. Rong Xiao had personally checked her body's condition and knew that she was telling the truth. He was relieved. However, that pair of deep phoenix eyes were still filled with a biting cold aura. Just now, what happened? This was also what Chu Ning and Dumpling wanted to know the most. Chu Liyue breathed a sigh of relief. Although she felt that the encounter just now was a little strange and unreal, she decided to tell the truth in the end. I heard someone playing the zither just now. Then she told him everything that she had felt just now. Chu Ning frowned. Dumpling looked worried. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes and seemed to be deep in thought. No one knew what he was thinking. That zither sound seemed to have a magical power that made people involuntarily indulge in it. And as time passed, the zither sound became more and more urgent and murderous. Just now I was careless, so... Chu Liyue suddenly paused when she said this. Father Rong Xiao, did you really not hear anything? Rong Xiao looked up slightly and said in a gentle but firm tone. No. At this moment, Chu Liyue saw a figure flash out of the corner of his eye. It was Chu Ning who was walking towards him quickly. The baleful aura here was very thick, and it was very difficult for him to walk. After a few steps, his forehead was covered with sweat, and his lips gradually turned pale. Father? Chu Liyue was a little surprised. Just as she was about to stop her, Chu Ning had already gritted her teeth and walked to her side. He let out a long sigh, then reached out his hand toward the wall without hesitation. Father! Chu Liyue was shocked and immediately reached out to stop him. Chu Ning shook his head. Don't worry. Father only came to take a look to see if there's anything strange about this place. Just watching from the side made him feel uneasy. Especially when he saw that she was injured, he felt even worse. Anyway, Daddy has a divine body now, so I'm not afraid of getting hurt. Chu Liyue's heart warmed, and he didn't say anything else. Chu Ning placed his hand on the black wall. After a long while, he loosened his grip, and there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Obviously, he still didn't hear anything. Chu Liyue wasn't surprised by this result. What she found strange was, why was she the only one who could hear the sound of the zither? Moreover, when she placed her hand on the wall, the sound of the zither immediately became clear, as if it was echoing in her ears. When she let go of her hand, this feeling quickly disappeared. She held her breath and concentrated, but she could still hear the faint sound in her ears. It was just that the melody became slow and low again, and there was no longer any trace of the murderous aura it had before. If it weren't for the lingering taste of blood between her lips and teeth, Chu Liyue would almost think that everything just now was just an illusion. This wall is very strange. We should be careful. Chu Ning frowned. Chu Liyue's lips moved, but seeing his worried expression, she finally nodded. Your nose. When we find Taizu, we'll leave here immediately. Just like that, they began to wait in place. Chu Liyue distributed the stones. If there was any movement within a radius of dozens of miles, she would be able to detect it immediately. The night was dark and silent. Rong Xiao stood guard and set up a barrier around them, blocking that terrifying murderous aura outside. Chu Liyue sat cross-legged and began to regulate her breath. Chu Ning, on the other hand, sat beside her and began to concentrate on his cultivation. Dumpling opened her eyes wide, crossed her arms, and stared angrily at the wall, as if she wanted to pierce through it with her eyes. What the hell was this thing that made Ayu vomit blood? If Ayu hadn't stopped her, she would have smashed this wall. Time slowly passed. In the darkness of the night, the wall stood silently between the heavens and the earth. However, for Chu Liyue, she couldn't completely calm down, because she could still hear the sound of the zither. It was illusory, and it was faintly discernible. She tried to temporarily shut off her hearing, but it was useless. The sound of the zither continued to linger in her mind, unable to be erased. Suddenly, a stone rolled to her feet. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She opened her eyes and looked ahead. A familiar aura was gradually approaching. That was Taizu. Chu Liyue was surprised and delighted. She immediately stood up. Sensing her actions, the rest of the people looked over. Chu Liyue suppressed the excitement in her heart and said, "Taizu should be nearby." Hearing this, Chu Ning also stood up and asked happily, "Really? Then can you find the specific location?" Because she knew that Chu Liyue was very concerned about this matter. Chu Ning was also very happy to see that there was progress. Chu Liyue's lips curled up. "I only sensed the aura of Taizu. I still need to investigate more. However, it shouldn't be too far away." As she spoke, she closed her eyes and waved her hands in front of her. Whoosh! The scattered stones around began to gather towards her quickly, and their movement also brought about subtle changes in the surrounding spatial energy. Chu Liyue's divine consciousness began to spread into the distance. Even with her eyes closed, she could still clearly see the surrounding scene. Taizu's aura was also approaching. At a certain moment, she finally determined a certain direction and opened her eyes again. However, at this moment, her expression became much more complicated. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes, as if he had already guessed something. Chu Ning was still a little puzzled. What's wrong? Did you find it?" Chu Liyue nodded and frowned slightly. Chu Ning was even more confused. "Since you found it, why do you still look so worried? Then where is Senior Shengguan now? Should we go over directly?" Chu Liyue pursed her lips. After a while, she exhaled softly. "I'm afraid. It's a little difficult." She raised her hand and enunciated each word clearly. "Taizu seems to be behind that wall." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1683. This was going to be difficult. It didn't take much thought to know that it would be extremely difficult to cross this wall. On the one hand, the wall was too tall, and cultivators couldn't fly here. Even if they could fly with the help of a divine artifact, they might not succeed. Chu Liyue didn't forget that Rongxiu had already mentioned that this wall was built to divide the two worlds. How could a wall that had existed for tens of thousands of years be so easy to cross? On the other hand, the wall stretched on endlessly. There was no end in sight to the left or the right. It was impossible to even think about going around it. Even if they were only separated by a wall from the Taizu, it wouldn't be that easy to meet them. Then this. Chu Ning instantly understood Chu Liyue's concerns and frowned. "You mean we have to find a way to cross?" Chu Liyue pondered for a moment. "If the Taizu can cross, it'll be the same. The important thing was that this was easy to say, but it was difficult to do. Even if the Taizu were a venerable god expert, Chu Liyue couldn't guarantee that he could deal with this wall. The ground beneath their feet had once buried countless venerable gods and venerable gods. In that earth-shattering battle, the gods fell, but this wall had withstood tens of thousands of years of wind, frost, and rain. Just this point alone was enough to see many problems. In this place, people like them were no more than ants." Chu Liyue rubbed the space between his eyebrows, feeling a headache coming on. How did that spatial turbulence bring the Taizu to the other side? Forget it. Let's get in touch with the Taizu first. With that, Chu Liyue walked up to the wall again. "Taizu." She called out twice, but there was no response. Chu Liyue could clearly sense that the distance between them and the Taizu was still shrinking. If she guessed correctly, the Taizu should be moving toward this wall right now. However, she didn't know if the Taizu could hear her through this wall. Chu Liyue paused for a moment, and then raised her voice again. "Taizu." After shouting this time, Chu Liyue took out the long yuan sword, and rhythmically knocked on the wall with the sword hilt. Just when Chu Liyue thought that this method wouldn't work, a familiar voice finally came from the other side. "Yue?" It was the Taizu. Chu Liyue's eyes. "Taizu, it's me. I can hear you." They could hear each other's voices. Shengguan Jing held the wall with one hand. Even though he was exhausted and his legs were trembling, he still couldn't suppress the joy in his heart at this moment. Suat originally, he only had a glimmer of hope, but he didn't expect that. Are you alright? Shang Guanjing asked hurriedly. They hadn't been separated for a long time, but the god-slaying tomb was full of danger. If they were careless, they would fall into trouble. During this period of time, he had been on tenterhooks, afraid that something would happen to them. I'm fine. Rongxiu has been with me. Furthermore, I've already found father and brought him back safely. Chu Luiyue knew that he was worried, so she immediately told him everything briefly and quickly. And that person has been taken care of by us. Although the process was a little complicated, the result was good. Shang Guanyu heaved a sigh of relief, and slowly sat down with the support of the wall. That's good, that's good. At this moment, Chu Luiyue heard that his voice was tired and weak. It seemed that the situation wasn't very good. She frowned. Taizu, how are you? The great ancestor silently exhaled a long breath and perked up. I'm fine. I just walked for a long time. I'll be fine after resting for a while. Chu Luiyue was still very worried. Ever since Taizu's divine body woke up, he had never been in such a tired and weak state. Coupled with the fact that she couldn't see him with her own eyes, Chu Luiyue was even more worried. Taizu, do you know of any way to cross this wall? As long as they could successfully meet up, they could leave this place first, and slowly recuperate after going back. Taizu paused for a moment and smiled bitterly. I don't know. Although he had been here before and seen this wall, he really didn't know how to deal with it. He had been worried that he would be separated from Chu Luiyue and the others along the way. But in the end, Chu Luiyue heard the helplessness in his voice, and her heart sank. If even Taizu couldn't do anything, things would be even more troublesome. Have a good rest first. We'll stay here with you. As for the way, there will definitely be a way. Chu Luiyue comforted. Taizu's lips moved, but in the end, he swallowed the words in his throat. Okay. A wall with people on both sides. They fell into a cold silence. Chu Luiyue crossed her arms and began to think hard. She had a feeling that there should be a way to solve this problem. I've seen this wall from afar before. It appeared in the evening and disappeared at dawn. Chu Ning suddenly said. Maybe we don't need to do anything. We just need to wait here for dawn. Chu Luiyue was stunned. That's right. How could she forget about this? Chu Ning had indeed mentioned this before, but she didn't take it to heart at that time. Now that she thought about it, if this wall could really disappear after daybreak, then they would be able to meet up with the great ancestor without any effort. She looked up at the sky. The night was dark. However, there didn't seem to be much time left until dawn. She nodded. Then let's wait and see. Hearing this, Rongxiu's eyes moved slightly as he looked meaningfully at the wall. However, he quickly retracted his gaze as if nothing had happened. Since they had confirmed that Taizu was on the other side, they obviously couldn't rest. They began to wait in silence. Waiting seemed to be especially unbearable. This was especially so for Chu Luiyue, because she found that as time passed, the sound of the zither that constantly echoed in her ears seemed to gradually become clearer. Even if all her attention was on Taizu, she still couldn't make the sound of the zither disappear from her ears. But fortunately, that biting cold killing intent didn't appear again. Because she was afraid that Chu Ning and Rongxiu would be worried, she didn't mention this matter again. Her expression was normal as she waited for dawn with them. Finally, the thick and dark sky gradually faded from the thick layer of black, gradually turning into a dark blue. A ray of white appeared on the horizon. After that, the bright glow of the morning sun gradually dyed half of the sky into different warm colors. Chu Luiyue slowly clenched her hands and looked at the wall again. The morning light sprinkled down gently, revealing a heavy and ancient aura. Chu Luiyue's heart gradually sank to the bottom of the valley. It didn't disappear. It didn't move. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1684. A chill suddenly rose from the soles of her feet and went straight to the top of her head. The cold air enveloped Chu Luiyue's entire body. The mottled black wall became clearer under the sunlight. Chu Ning was also shocked. How could this be? It was clear that this wall would disappear after daybreak. Today, It seems that I have to think of another way. Chu Luyue pondered for a moment, and finally chose to accept reality. Although she didn't know why the wall didn't disappear, she vaguely felt that it seemed to have something to do with the sound of the zither she heard. But now she didn't have any evidence, so it was naturally hard to say. Chu Luyue took a step forward. Taizu, are you okay? Shangguan Jing also didn't sleep for the whole night. However, after a night of recuperation, his body had almost recovered, and his voice sounded much more robust. I'm fine. Don't worry. Chu Luyue thought for a moment and asked. Taizu, what if we go out separately and meet outside the god-slaying tomb? Shangguan Jing sighed. How could he not know what Chu Luyue meant by asking this question? It was too difficult to cross the wall and meet her. It would be good if they could meet outside. But the key was, there are countless entrances and exits in the god-slaying tomb. And there are countless void turbulences in the middle. If you are careless, you will lose your way. Back then, I went directly to the northern region of the primordial world. If we go out separately, I'm afraid that it would take a lot of effort. Chu Luyue's head hurt even more. What Taizu said was what she was most worried about. The god-slaying tomb was too big. It was impossible to fly in the vast wilderness. Once they were separated, it would take a lot of time and energy to find each other. The sound of the zither in her mind seemed to be closer and lingered around, making Chu Luyue more and more anxious. Bang! She gritted her teeth and punched the wall. What exactly? Buzz! A slight fluctuation suddenly came from his dantian. Chu Luyue was startled for a moment, then immediately became spirited. This movement was the water droplet. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes when he noticed the change in her expression. What's wrong? Chu Luyue shook his head and tried to punch the wall again. Wang! Another wave of energy came. The most subtle thing was that this time, Chu Luyue used a little more force, and the movement of the water droplet seemed to be a little stronger than the first time. Chu Luyue looked at the wall curiously. His eyes were completely different from before. She finally knew where that faintly discernible sense of familiarity came from. Wasn't that solemn, dignified, and lofty aura extremely similar to the water droplet in her dantian? However, after she became a high god, the water droplet kept a low profile and stayed quietly in her body. That was why she didn't think of it for a while. But thinking back to the past, she was often picked on by the water droplet. Chu Luyue's eyes were filled with suspicion. Could it be that the water droplet in her body had something to do with this wall? If that was the case, did it mean that she could find a way to cross this wall and successfully meet up with the Taizu? Just as this thought flashed through her mind, a harsh voice suddenly came from behind her. Uncle Luoyan, it's them. They're really haunting me. Chu Luyue rubbed the space between his eyebrows and slowly turned around. As expected, he saw a few familiar faces. The one who spoke just now was Nanyi. Different from the timid and aggrieved appearance before. Nanyi's eyes were arrogant, and her expression was arrogant. From top to bottom, there was no longer any fear from before. At this moment, she was standing beside a middle-aged man and pointing at Chu Luyue. It's her. She's the one who reduced us to such a state. Uncle Luoyan, you must avenge ye. Chu Luyue raised his eyebrows and smiled. No wonder she suddenly became so presumptuous. It turned out that she had asked for reinforcements. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at the man called Uncle Luoyan by Nanyi. That man looked to be in his 30s. He was tall and burly, with wheat-colored skin, sharp eyebrows and starry eyes. He could be considered handsome, but what was more eye-catching was the shocking aura around him. Although the other party hadn't made a move yet, Chu Luyue had already quickly determined the other party's realm. He was definitely a venerable god expert, and he was the kind with extremely strong combat strength. The number of venerable god experts she had seen in her life could be counted on one hand, but she had a deep impression of every one of them. This kind of person's aura was completely different from that of a venerable doctor or a venerable weapon refiner. As long as he stood there, he didn't need to do anything, and he already had enough deterrence. No wonder Nanyi was suddenly so confident. While Chu Luyue was sizing up Luoyan was also sizing her up. After looking around, a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. Because He was actually unable to detect this woman's true realm. The other party's strength was obviously inferior to his. He was a venerable god expert, and was famous for his eyesight. Generally speaking, as long as he glanced at the other party, he could easily see through the other party's background. But this woman, he couldn't see through her. The only explanation was that she had an extraordinary divine artifact on her that was specially used to conceal her aura. Even he couldn't see through it. It seemed that he still couldn't underestimate them. Luo Yan's mind raced, but his expression was very calm. He put one hand behind his back and took a step forward. Were you the one who caused Yi's injuries? His tone was calm, but there was no anger in it, and there was a sense of superiority in it. It was a simple sentence, but when it came out of his mouth, it was like a question. Before Chu Liyue could speak, Rong Xiu had already walked in front of her. You haven't even introduced yourself, yet you're questioning my princess consort. Is this the rule of your Nan family? Luo Yan frowned. You're the holy son of Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu? Rong Xiu's thin lips curved slightly, and there was a faint smile on his face. Before coming here, they should have already said a lot about us. Don't you think it's unnecessary to ask this question now? Luo Yan slowly clenched his fists. On the way here, he had indeed heard a few people talk about what had happened before. At first, he thought that they were exaggerating, but now it seemed that Rong Xiu was indeed as arrogant as they said. He knew that he was here to collect a debt, but he was still so righteous and even tit for tat. Luo Yan smiled, but it was obvious that he didn't take Rong Xiu seriously. Rong Xiu, I can understand that you're young and frivolous, but it's not a good thing to be too arrogant. Today, I'm here to seek an explanation for Yi. This matter has nothing to do with you, so I advise you to step aside. In other words, he was here to make trouble for Chu Liyue. Rong Xiu also smiled, but there seemed to be a layer of frost between his eyebrows, and there was a biting cold air. What if I say no? Mobile users, please browse for a more high-quality reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1685. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere froze. The smile on Luo Yan's face faded. Rong Xiu, I know that you have been quite famous in the Divine Ruins world all these years. But there is always someone better than you. Don't tell me you don't know that? This sovereign is only giving you this face because you are indeed someone important. Don't go too far. Rong Xiu's smile deepened as if he had heard a joke. You want to touch I's princess consort, and you even asked me not to interfere. Luo Yan, don't you think it's ridiculous? This sentence made the last trace of smile on Luo Yan's face disappear completely. His expression became cold and solemn, and a heavy pressure spread out from his body. Do you really want to be enemies with me? Rong Xiu smiled but didn't say anything, as if he was too lazy to answer this question. Such an attitude was undoubtedly the most direct provocation to Luo Yan. You, Uncle Luo Yan. Seeing that he was about to fly into a rage, Nan Yi hurriedly grabbed his arm. Uncle Luo Yan, didn't you come this time to avenge me? Don't target the wrong person. Didn't I already say that all the conflicts and problems were caused by that Shen Guanyu? Luo Yan looked at her thoughtfully. Nan Yi looked away guiltily. Nan Yuxing and the others standing behind couldn't help but look at each other with complicated expressions. Actually, Rong Xiu is clearly the one who should be punished if we pursue this matter. But after Nan Yi invited Luo Yan over, she pushed most of the blame to Shen Guanyu. At this point, how could they not understand Nan Yi's thoughts? But now that things had come to this, they couldn't say anything. Luo Yan had always doted on Nan Yi, and he believed almost everything she said. Wouldn't they be adding to the trouble if they went up to say these things? Thus, they could only choose to remain silent. Seeing their reaction, Luo Yan could guess what was going on. Although he doted on Nan Yi, it didn't mean that he was brainless. Although he was a little surprised, he had never seen Nan Yi so protective of anyone. His intentions were as clear as day. Luo Yan frowned. Nan Yi had long reached the age of marriage, but she had never been interested in these things. It was rare for her to fall in love with someone, but that person just had to be Rong Xiu. His identity was still acceptable, but Who in the Divine Ruins realm didn't know that Rong Xiao had already personally chosen a princess and set up a marriage contract? If word of this got out, her reputation. Luo Yin wanted to say something to her, but when he saw how guilty Nanny looked, his heart ached for her, and he couldn't bring himself to say the words that were at the tip of his tongue. No matter what, the child had grown up, and he still had to give her some face outside. These words, it wouldn't be too late to say them when we get back, but now he had to solve the problem at hand. Thinking of this, his eyes darkened as he looked at Chu Luiyue. Danger! Chu Luiyue immediately became alert the moment his gaze swept over. His entire body tensed up. Even if the other party didn't say anything, she still keenly sensed the other party's killing intent. This was an extremely sensitive sixth sense that she had developed after experiencing countless life and death situations. Chu Luiyue's brows moved slightly as countless guesses and thoughts flashed through her mind. This Luo Yan seemed to be targeting her? Just because she bullied Nanny? She heard what he said very clearly just now. He seemed to be here only for Nanny, and didn't include the others at all. From the beginning to the end, he really only had Nanny in his eyes and heart. Strange. There was no need to talk about the two elders. Wasn't that Nan Yuxing the eldest young master of the Nan family, and Nanny's biological brother? He was injured more seriously than Nanny. But why did it seem like Luo Yin didn't care at all? Wasn't such favoritism a little too much? Actually, Chu Luiyue didn't know that Luo Yin was famous for doting on Nanny. Who in the Nan family didn't know that offending Nanny was equivalent to offending Luo Yin? Although Nan Yifan doted on her a lot, there were still times when he was strict with her. But Luo Yin wasn't like that. Since young, as long as Nanny asked, he would try his best to satisfy any request. Even if Nanny was arrogant and willful, and had caused a lot of trouble in the past, he had never said anything harsh to her. However, Luo Yin was powerful, and had a very noble status in the Nan family. Most people couldn't do anything to him. Speaking of which, a large part of the reason why Nanny had developed her current personality was because of Luo Yin. But Luo Yin never felt that there was anything wrong with it, and still agreed to Nanny's requests. Even if this time, Nan Yifan had already informed him in advance that he wasn't allowed to come and help on his own. After receiving Nanny's news, he immediately rushed over. However, considering that he had to give Nan Yifan some face, Luo Yin indeed only intended to help Nanny vent her anger, and leave the rest to them. Yi's request is very simple. As long as you come out and experience all the pain she suffered before and apologize to her, this matter will be considered over. Luo Yin said indifferently. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue almost thought that she had heard wrongly. She blinked and laughed out loud. What? Luo Yan's eyes were cold. Since you heard it, do as I say. My time is limited. Chu Luiyue had always thought that she was arrogant. But today, she had broadened her horizons. Along the way, these people were clearly the ones who kept pestering them and finding trouble with them. Now that things had come to this, they actually felt that they had been wronged. She was already impatient with them, and with the matter of the great ancestor, she was still uneasy. Hearing this now was undoubtedly adding fuel to the fire. But the angrier she was, the more rational she became. She took a step forward and walked to Rong Xiao's side. Then, she reached out and hugged Rong Xiao's arm. Rong Xiao immediately held her hand and intertwined their fingers. Chu Luiyue smiled slightly and asked, I admit that some of her injuries are indeed related to me, but aren't you curious why I treated her like this? Luo Yin frowned. Chu Luiyue blinked and slowly said, That's right. She snatched my man right in front of me. She even did such a shameless thing. Can't I hit her? Nanny's face instantly turned pale, and then flushed red. Shangguanyu, you. She really didn't expect Chu Luiyue to be so straightforward and unpleasant. She had never been humiliated like this since she was young. Luo Yan's expression also changed. Nanny hurriedly glanced at him and quickly explained, Uncle Luo Yan, don't listen to her nonsense. She's the one who slandered me. It's not impossible for me to apologize. But before that, second Miss Nan, please apologize to me first. How about that? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 1686. Nanny's face turned red and white. You. What nonsense are you spouting? Chu Luiwei raised her eyebrows in surprise. Did I say something wrong? Didn't you say that as long as my husband divorces me, you will? Did I hear wrongly? You. Nanny almost fainted from anger. How could she let Uncle Luo Yin know about this? In front of him, she had always been well-behaved and obedient. Even though she liked to be willful and act coquettishly sometimes, she had never said or done anything overboard in front of him. She knew that although this uncle of hers looked young, he was actually an old fogey. He was very conservative about many things. Now that Shang Guanyu had exposed this matter in front of him, what should she do in the future? Sure enough, Luo Yin looked at her coldly. Did you really say that? Nanny's heart trembled. She rarely heard Uncle Luo Yin speak to her in such a tone. For a moment, she was worried and afraid. Her heart was in a mess. I didn't. Nanny's eyes reddened, and she looked aggrieved. Uncle Luo Yin, you watched me grow up. How could I say such things and do such things? Are you going to believe an outsider and not me? Luo Yan's gaze wavered. What Nanny said was not unreasonable. If the other party had said that on purpose to slander her. He glanced at the people opposite him. Nan Yuxing hurriedly said, That's right. Uncle Luo Yan, was really wronged. Although she is usually a little willful, she is still very principled in many things. She didn't say those things at all. It was all made up by Shang Guanyu. Luo Yan looked at Elder Wu Peng, and Nan Yuxing judging from their attitude. They seemed to agree. The anger in Luo Yan's heart subsided a little. From the corner of his eye, he saw Nan Yi's red eyes and nose. His heart ached for her, and his tone finally softened. All right, why wouldn't I believe you? Don't cry. Nan Yi heaved a sigh of relief, but she still looked very aggrieved. Mother has taught me these principles before, so why would I do that? Uncle Luo Yan, you've wronged me. Hearing her mention her mother, Luo Yan's expression darkened, and the gaze he looked at her with became even more tender. He rubbed Nanny's head. All right, Uncle has wronged you. This time, I'll definitely help you vent your anger. I won't let you be wronged, okay? Only then did Nanny smile through her tears. Uncle is the best to me. After she finished speaking, she glanced at Chu Luiwei, seemingly unintentionally, with a hint of sarcasm. Uncle Luo Yin had doted on her for so many years. How could he side with someone else? Today, she was going to make Shang Guanyu pay 100 times the price. Chu Luiwei was amazed and almost couldn't help but applaud. She had seen people who spoiled their children, but she had never seen someone who spoiled their children to such an extent. No wonder she always felt that Nanny's brain was abnormal. It turned out that everyone in the Nan family was the same. She instantly lost interest in arguing with the other party. They were obviously here to find trouble with her. No matter what the truth was, they obviously didn't care at all. As expected, Luo Yin said, Shang Guanyu, no matter what you say now, the outcome won't change. If you don't agree to my suggestion just now, don't blame me for being rude. Did this mean that he had directly changed to a threat? Rong Xiu's force surged in his palm, and the temperature around him quickly dropped. Chu Luiwei scratched his palm lightly. This wasn't a good time to make a move. Although she wasn't afraid, Taizu was still on the other side of the wall. They had to focus on more important things. Rong Xiu's gaze turned slightly, and he glanced at her. Chu Luiwei gave him a look. Rong Xiu's gaze flickered, but in the end, he lowered his eyes slightly to hide the surging waves in his eyes. It's not impossible for me to agree to your suggestion, but I have my own conditions. If you agree to it, I can negotiate with you, Chu Luiwei said with a smile. Luo Yin thought that she would be angry, furious, or even explode, but he didn't expect her to say something like this. This Shang Guanyu doesn't seem to be what I expected. Luo Yan's expression turned cold. Do you think you still have the right to say this? Chu Luiwei chuckled and glanced at Nan Yuxing and the others. Don't you guys know best whether I have the right to say this or not? It seemed like they didn't tell Luo Yan that she killed the black-robed man. Chu Luiwei's words made them feel guilty for some reason. Although they didn't want to admit it, They had to admit that Rong Xiao and Shangguan Yu seemed to have an extraordinary trump card. If the two sides really fought, the outcome would be uncertain, especially when that little girl was behind her. Elder Wu Peng paused and finally took the initiative to speak. What are your conditions? Luo Yan was even more surprised. Elder Wu Peng had always been arrogant, but he was actually willing to accept Shangguan Yu's suggestion? What exactly? It's very simple. Chu Luiyue smiled, and her eyes curved into crescents as she looked sincere. As long as you find the thing you're looking for and give it to me, I can agree to your request. We'll trade fairly. Dream on. Before Chu Luiyue could finish speaking, Nanyi suddenly interrupted her. She really dared to think that they would use that thing to exchange for it. Chu Luiyue's smile didn't change, but her voice turned cold. I'll return the same words to you. You want to force me to apologize and beg for mercy? I think you're dreaming. Digression. Ha ha ha. Today we will update together. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1687. Dead silence. Chu Luiyue's words dazed the few people opposite her, including Luo Yan. None of them had expected Chu Luiyue to have the guts to say such brazen words. Her attitude was too unyielding and her eyes were cold. Although the corners of her lips were slightly curved, they were as sharp as a blade and carried a murderous intent that seemed to be able to cut through everything. Nanyi's heart suddenly trembled violently. An indescribable fear surged from the depths of her heart. This wasn't the first time she felt such fear when facing Shangguan Yu. It was just that it wasn't so clear and strong before. Looking at that pair of eyes, a clear thought flashed through her mind at lightning speed. If she provoked Shangguan Yu, she would really kill her. Nanyi originally wanted to mock and retort, but at this moment, she was at a loss for words. Her legs were a little weak. If Luo Yan wasn't standing beside her, she would have already retreated uncontrollably. Luo Yan's frown deepened when he saw this. How did she find out about this? He was obviously questioning Nanyi and the others. Not many people knew that they were looking for that thing. Now even Shangguan Yu, which they had no relationship with, no, they should be enemies. Nan Yixing broke out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly said, Uncle Luo Yan, this we didn't reveal it on purpose. It's just that when we were discussing this matter in private, they overheard it. Luo Yan's gaze turned even colder. This mistake was even more ridiculous. They were overheard? Weren't they too careless? This was a serious matter, but they didn't have the slightest bit of vigilance. Elder Baitong stepped forward to smooth things over. Luo Yan, actually, this matter isn't eldest young master and second Mrs. fault. It's all my and Wu Peng's negligence. There was really no way to explain this matter. They had always been very vigilant. But that day, when Rong Xiao appeared not far away from them, there wasn't any fluctuation at all. They really couldn't be blamed for this matter. But they really couldn't say this out loud. It was embarrassing. Moreover, what was the use of saying all this now? Elder Wu Peng stared at Chu Luiyue. You really do know what we're looking for. Previously it was only a guess, but now it was absolutely certain. Chu Luiyue frowned. She was just trying to trick them, because she could tell that what they were looking for was very important to them. But she really didn't know what it was. She was already too busy with her own affairs, so how could she have the time to care about them? Upon hearing this, Nanyi immediately perked up. She suddenly raised her hand and pointed at Chu Luiyue. She doesn't just know. That thing is on her. Her voice was so sharp that it hurt people's ears. And this sentence caused the atmosphere to become even more stagnant. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that the aura of the people in front of him had changed greatly at this moment. An extremely dangerous aura loomed over them. Believe it or not, I don't know what you're looking for. As for what you said about that thing being on my body, it's even more nonsense. Chu Luiyue laughed and pointed at the stones scattered around her. To be honest, after I came to the god-slaying tomb, the only thing I took from here was these stones. Could it be that these are what you're looking for? Sophistry. Nanyi was full of confidence at this moment, and her voice rose a few degrees. I definitely won't be wrong about that thing's aura. It's on your body. Even now you still refuse to admit it. I was wondering why it was so coincidental that we kept bumping into you along the way. So, you've been planning to snatch this thing from the beginning. Chu Luyue became more and more irritated. She didn't look for trouble, but trouble always came knocking on her door. Time after time, it was really annoying. However, Nanny didn't notice the change in her aura and continued talking to herself. Uncle Luoyan, not only did she hurt me, but she also snatched my thing. This time, you must help me. You must not let her off easily. Clang. The sound of a zither filled with murderous intent suddenly came from the black wall. The stones scattered on the ground also became restless. The energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings started to flow rapidly. Everyone was shocked. Nanny's voice also stopped abruptly, as she looked at everything that suddenly happened in front of her in horror. Chu Luyue looked up slightly. Her eyes were cold, like ice and snow that hadn't melted for 1,000 years. And the coldness was oppressive. She said word by word. Are you done? Nanny met her gaze, and her throat suddenly felt like it was being strangled by an invisible hand. At this moment, even breathing seemed to have become difficult. The blood all over her body also froze. There had never been a moment when she felt the threat of death so vividly. Luo Yin pulled her behind him and took a step forward, the force around him surging. Something was wrong. There was something wrong with this Shangguan Yu. And the black wall behind her. There was also something wrong. Why was there suddenly a strange sound of a zither coming from inside? Chu Ning and Rong Xiu immediately looked at each other. This was the zither sound that she had mentioned previously? You are. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly. His cold and deep voice reverberated in her ears. And Chu Luyue instantly snapped out of her daze. The layer of indifference in her eyes quietly dissipated. And when she looked up again, it had already returned to normal. She had concealed all the changes in her emotions perfectly, and only Rong Xiu, who was beside her, saw it clearly. At the same time, the sound of the zither quietly stopped, and the surrounding stones also returned to normal. Even the surging of the energy in the surroundings gradually calmed down. It was as if that momentary movement just now was just an illusion. Rong Xiu's brows moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, a majestic force suddenly descended. At the same time, the sound of something breaking through the air whistled over. Rong Xiu looked up. It was Luo Yan, who had taken this opportunity to make a move. His eyes instantly turned cold. With a wave of his sleeve, a golden flame quickly flew out and set up a barrier in front of the two of them. However, Luo Yan was a god expert, and he had extremely rich combat experience. Rong Xiu's move had long been within his expectations. Therefore, he had not held back from the beginning. Luo Yan's force transformed into an arrow and directly pierced Rong Xiu's barrier. Then, it went straight for Chu Liyue's glabella. The killing intent was biting cold. At this moment, Rong Xiu directly made a move and grabbed the arrow tightly. However, before they could breathe a sigh of relief, Chu Liyue suddenly felt as if something had wrapped around her ankle. She looked down and saw that a transparent rope as thick as a thumb had unknowingly appeared by her feet and tightly bound her ankle. Her heart sank. Luo Yin had already pulled. Chu Liyue's body was immediately dragged out uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1688. Are you? The sudden turn of events shocked Chu Ning and Dumpling, and they prepared to step forward. However, Chu Luyue reacted extremely quickly. A cold glint flashed across her hand. Red Cloud Sword. She flipped her wrist and slashed at the transparent rope. Clang! The crisp sound of jade hitting stone was heard. Sparks flew. Chu Liyue's heart sank. Red Cloud Sword was a supremacy artifact. It was extremely sharp and could cut through metal like mud. This transparent rope looked soft and transparent, but it was actually extremely flexible and tough. His sword only left a shallow white mark on the surface of the stone. Luo Yin snorted. This Shangguan Yu was indeed quite capable. He could even use a supremacy artifact so smoothly. Unfortunately, Exalted God was ultimately just an exalted God. This bit of strength was really not enough in front of him. Thinking of this, he grabbed the other end of the rope tightly and pulled again. Divine binding vine restrain. The transparent rope immediately tightened, and a bright red mark appeared on Chu Luyue's ankle. Her body was pulled by this force, and she lost her balance again. Rongxiu moved, and was about to make a move when a black figure suddenly flashed in front of him. It was Elder Wu Peng. Rongxiu, today we just want to seek justice for second miss from Shangguanyu. After this matter is over, we will naturally release her. Why do you have to do this and make things worse? Rongxiu seemed to have heard a joke, and his thin lips curved into an extremely cold smile. That is I's princess consort. You did this in front of I, and you wanted to pretend that I did not see it. It seems that you have turned a deaf ear to what I said earlier. His voice was as cold as ice, and it was bone-piercing. Elder Wu Peng paused, and suddenly recalled Rongxiu's nonchalant smile when he mentioned the family head. This was something that he had been secretly worried about. But now that things had come to this, it was obviously impossible for them to back down. We don't want to be enemies with Yintian Tower. It won't do anyone any good. As long as Shangguanyu was willing to apologize, this matter could be resolved. You. Before he finished speaking, Rongxiu had already raised his hand. A cluster of golden flames surged from the bottom of his eyes. You're wrong about one thing. Rongxiu's force surged, and the terrifying pressure continued to rise. From the moment you touched her, you became the mortal enemy of Yintian Tower. Boom! A powerful force went straight for Elder Wu Peng's face. Rongxiu, you! Elder Wu Peng did not expect that Rongxiu would actually attack him. He was caught off guard and narrowly avoided the attack. However, a long burn mark was still left on his shoulder. The intense burning pain made Elder Wu Peng both shocked and angry. Did Rongxiu know what he was doing? Was he really going to go against them for Shangguanyu? They were not after Shangguanyu's life. Countless thoughts flashed through Elder Wu Peng's mind, but he did not dare to slack off. He hurriedly mobilized the force in his body and braced himself to fight Rongxiu. But soon he sensed that something was wrong. Why did Rongxiu's combat power seem to be stronger than before? The two of them had only exchanged a few blows, but Elder Wu Peng already felt that he could not hold on any longer. Could it be that Rongxiu had been hiding his true strength before? This aura was clearly much stronger than that of an ordinary high god. Most importantly, Rongxiu's attacks were ruthless, and every move was fatal. There were no unnecessary movements, and he did not leave any room for Elder Wu Peng. This was the fighting spirit and vigor that could only be obtained after experiencing countless life-and-death battles. Elder Wu Peng had seen his fair share of storms, and his strength was not weak either. However, he had spent most of his time and energy on refining weapons, and had not carefully studied the cultivation of martial artists. Hence, at this moment, he was quickly at a disadvantage against Rongxiu. On the other side, Chu Ning could not hold back and charged forward. Elder Baitong saw this scene, and could not help but sneer. A stage 1 martial artist? Did he see wrongly? This kind of existence that was inferior to an ant actually had such guts? He must be tired of living. Elder Baitong waved his sleeves. A ball of flame suddenly appeared in his palm. Then it quickly flew out. Bang bang bang. When the flame was just a step away from Chu Ning, it suddenly exploded. It transformed into countless tiny sparks. You overestimate yourself. It's your honor to die in my hands, what? Elder Baitong's words came to an abrupt end. He widened his eyes in shock, almost unable to believe what he saw. The countless sparks that were burning fiercely seemed to be pushed by a force, and suddenly scattered in all directions. And Chu Ning, who was supposed to be dead, was standing on the spot unharmed. Around his body, there was a blue stream of light gently surging. That was God territory. Because of the shock, Elder Baitong's voice became sharp. Nan Yuxing and the rest noticed the commotion, and their expressions changed slightly. How can a stage 1 martial artist have a god territory? Nan Yuxing was originally happy to watch the show, and wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to vent his anger. He did not expect that things would develop in an unexpected direction. Rongxiu being able to contend with Elder Wu Peng was actually within their expectations. After all, Elder Baitong's injury was caused by him, But this middle-aged man with ragged clothes and bloodstains all over his body clearly looked ordinary. How could he display a god territory? The aura on his body was indeed that of a stage 1 martial artist. This is the indestructible divine body. Luo Yan's eyes turned slightly and looked meaningfully at Chu Ning. He quickly had a guess. In the world, there was probably only this unique divine body that could display a god territory as a stage 1 martial artist. Although there was nothing to be afraid of, these people did have some abilities. No wonder they could last until now in the god-slaying tomb, and make Wu Peng and the rest suffer such a huge loss. Clang! Another fierce collision sound was heard. Luo Yan retracted his gaze and saw that Chu Luiyue was still trying to use Red Cloud Sword to cut the divine binding vine. He laughed carelessly and looked at Chu Luiyue with undisguised contempt and indifference. Childish. To him, Chu Luiyue's actions were obviously useless struggles. With a flick of his wrist, the divine binding vine quickly retracted and extended upwards. Half of Chu Luiyue's body, including the hand that was holding the sword, was tightly bound by the transparent divine binding vine. Her brows furrowed even tighter. This thing was indeed not ordinary. At this moment, she could almost feel that the force around her seemed to be trapped by this divine binding vine. Luo Yan raised his hand and clenched it. Chu Luiyue's neck tightened. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1689. Her body was forced to hang in the air, as if an iron hand was gripping her neck tightly. A terrifying pressure pressed down on his body, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Chu Luiyue's face flushed red. Luo Yan's eyes were high and mighty. Are you willing to apologize now? Nanny stood beside him and couldn't help but smile smugly when she saw this scene. She looked at Chu Luiyue with a trace of undisguised cold mockery. Shang Guanyu was indeed capable. If it was a one-on-one fight, Nanny was sure that she was definitely not her match. But so what? Even if she couldn't defeat her, she could ask Uncle Luo Yan for help. In the end, Shang Guanyu would still be trampled under her feet. The sound of the zither seemed to be getting closer and clearer to Chu Luiyue's ears. Her lips curled into a smile, but there was coldness in the depths of her black jade-like eyes. You're dreaming. You're courting death. Luo Yan held the divine binding vine tightly and was about to move when he suddenly felt a cold wind coming from the side. He frowned and quickly turned to look. Unknowingly, a small figure had already appeared around him. The distance between them was less than 3 steps. His heart was suddenly filled with shock. When did this little girl come here? How come he didn't sense any energy or spatial fluctuation? Dumpling's small face was full of anger, and her eyes were red. The lotus leaf dress on her body fluttered even though there was no wind. At a glance, it was like a raging flame that was going to devour everything. How dare you bully Ayu? You're courting death. Tuanzi roared, and at the same time he punched out. Her small hand was chubby and tender. When it was clenched into a fist, it looked like a soft cotton candy. However, Luo Yan's expression suddenly changed. The speed of Dumpling's punch was simply too fast. Moreover, when her fist struck, the surrounding void actually couldn't withstand it and started to collapse one after another. It was obvious that this fist contained an astonishing amount of power. Luo Yan's eyes darkened as he punched out at the same time. Bang! The 2 fists collided, producing a muffled sound. Luo Yan felt as if his fist had landed on a steel plate. After a brief moment of silence, an indescribable numbing pain spread through his body. Luo Yan's eyelids twitched violently. If it wasn't for the fact that his divine body had already reached large success, his bones would have been shattered. On the other hand, the little girl's expression did not change. It was as if she could not feel any pain at all. What a hard fist! What a powerful physical body! Countless speculations flashed through Luo Yan's mind. Such a terrifying melee ability was definitely not something an ordinary human could possess. What's more, this little girl clearly didn't have the slightest ripple of origin power on her body. Could it be a magical beast? However, the only ones that could transform into human form were the 2 ancient divine beasts. I've never heard of them being able to transform into such an appearance. Before he could figure it out, Dumpling's second punch had already arrived. I can't fight her head-on anymore. Luo Yan's brows furrowed. With a tap of his toes, he swiftly retreated. Pa! Seeing that he was about to retreat, Dumpling stomped on the divine binding vine ruthlessly. Just as the transparent rope was about to wrap around her, Dumpling narrowed her eyes, and her body suddenly burned with reddish-gold flames. At the same time, she bent down, grabbed the divine binding vine in her hand, and tugged hard. The divine binding vine instantly tightened its grip. Luo Yan's other hand was still tightly holding onto the divine binding vine. This time, it directly pulled him back, causing him to be unable to continue retreating. However, at this moment, he could no longer be bothered to be shocked by Dumpling's strength. This was because he had finally confirmed Dumpling's identity. Reddish-gold heavenly phoenix? This flame, this aura. It's definitely a reddish-gold heavenly phoenix. He quickly circulated the energy around him, and was in a stalemate with Dumpling. At the same time, his gaze kept wandering between Dumpling and Chu Luyue. An absurd guess appeared in his mind. Could it be? This reddish-gold heavenly phoenix is Shangguan Yu's contracted divine beast? Luo Yan was shocked and really did not dare to believe it. However, apart from this, there seemed to be no other better answer. If not for the contract, why would this reddish-gold heavenly phoenix be so angry because of Shangguan Yu's injury? It would not even care about anything else and rush up to attack. But how arrogant was the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? They usually did not even bother to interact with humans, let alone have a contract with them. Such a reddish-gold heavenly phoenix had wandered outside and become a contracted divine beast of the human race. However, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan did not have any reaction at all. Luo Yan found it unbelievable. However, now was not the time to dwell on this. After hesitating for a moment, he simply let go of the divine binding vine. Dumpling was caught off guard and fell back uncontrollably due to inertia. On Chu Luyue's side, she had just managed to catch her breath and was about to help Dumpling up when another force suddenly attacked her. Not good. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly dodged. At this moment, Luo Yan seized the opportunity and pounced on her again. This time, his speed was even faster. Chu Luyue instinctively sensed danger and was forced to retreat. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had retreated quite a distance away from Dumpling. Chu Luyue frowned. Luo Yan clearly wanted to avoid Dumpling from attacking her. Although Dumpling's combat strength was not bad, Luo Yan was a god-level expert after all. It might not be a problem to temporarily block him, but it was impossible for her to truly defeat Luo Yan. She clenched the red cloud sword in her hand tightly, but because Luo Yan's suppression was too strong, she was unable to attack. Soon Luo Yan approached her again. Chu Luyue's speed was not slow, and she was definitely considered one of the best among cultivators of the same level. However, compared to Luo Yan, she was still too weak. Luo Yan caught up to her without much effort at all. This time, his attack was very direct, and his palm was about to hit Chu Luyue. An indescribable sense of suppression came crashing down. Chu Luyue's breathing stagnated. Originally, she wanted to try to receive this attack, but the other party's suppression was too strong, and she could not circulate the energy in her body. The difference in strength between the two of them was too big, so she did not even have the chance to attack. Luo Yan's expression was indifferent, and he looked at her as if he was looking at an ant that was struggling futilely. Shangguan Yu, you should know that there are some people that you can't afford to offend. As his voice fell, the tyrannical wind from his palm had already enveloped Chu Luyue. At this moment, her body seemed to be nailed to the ground, and she could not move at all. She could only watch helplessly as that shocking power came closer and closer to her. A thick smell of blood spread out between her lips and teeth. The sound of the zither beside Chu Luyue's ears suddenly became clear at this moment. Her temples were throbbing, as if something was about to break out from the bottom of her heart. However, at this moment, a deep and vigorous voice exploded in the sky like a sudden clap of thunder. Who dares to hurt my disciple? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1690. Master, Chu Luiyue was overjoyed and immediately looked up. The void vibrated and rippled. A figure in a long white robe stepped out from within. It was the dean of Lingxiao College, her master Nan Suhuai. He waved his sleeve, and a powerful force flew out. It went straight for Luo Yan. Danger! Luo Yan was shocked, and had no choice but to stop and retreat. However, the force of Nan Suhuai's strike was so strong that it caused him to stagger backward. Almost at the same time, Elder Wu Peng was no match for Rong Xiao and suffered a heavy blow. He flew backward and landed heavily on the ground. Elder Bai Tong, who had been fighting with Chu Ning, was also shocked when he noticed the commotion and immediately retreated. Uncle Luo Yan, Elder Wu Peng. Nan Yi could no longer maintain the smile on her face when she saw the people on her side being repelled. She rushed over in a hurry. Nan Yixing opened his mouth, but did not say anything. However, a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Nan Suhuai's figure flashed and blocked in front of Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiao stepped forward and supported Chu Luiyue. Nan Suhuai first turned around and glanced at her nervously. Are you okay? Chu Luiyue shook her head. Master, don't worry. I'm fine. It was just a flesh wound. It was not a big deal. Luo Yan did not have time to be ruthless. Her master had arrived. Rong Xiao's face was cold and solemn. He reached out to touch Chu Luiyue's neck. Hiss! The sudden pain made Chu Luiyue shrink her neck. Sensing Rong Xiao's aura turning colder, Chu Luiyue quickly said, "It's just a small wound. It's not a big deal." When the two of them were fighting just now, there were a few red marks on her neck. She was so anxious that she forgot about it. Rong Xiao didn't say anything. He stared at the wound with a deep look in his eyes. Chu Ning and Dumpling quickly followed. Although Chu Luiyue came out unscathed, they all saw the situation clearly. Luo Yan was indeed ruthless. If Nan Suhuai hadn't arrived in time, no one knew what would have happened to Chu Luiyue. Nan Suhuai's face turned cold. He turned to Luo Yan and sneered. Luo Yan, I haven't seen you for many years. You've really become more and more capable. You actually dare to bully this old man's disciple. His voice was deep like thunder, and every single word carried a shocking pressure that smashed heavily into the ears of Luo Yan and the others. Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi, whose cultivation bases were slightly weaker, trembled at the same time and spat out blood. Elder Bai Tong was already seriously injured, so he was unable to dodge in time. Suddenly bearing the terrifying pressure, his face immediately turned pale. There was no need to mention Elder Wu Peng. He had already been beaten black and blue by Rong Xiao. At this moment, he didn't even have the strength to get up. Although Luo Yan was slightly better than them, his face turned extremely ugly when he saw the situation on his side. Nan Suhuai actually came. Who in the Divine Ruins world didn't know that Nan Suhuai was a rare all-rounder who was extremely outstanding in all aspects of cultivation? He had already broken through to the Supreme God realm several decades ago. Although Nan Suhuai had kept a low profile in recent years and rarely appeared in public in the Divine Ruins world, Luo Yan didn't dare to underestimate him. Who knew what realm Nan Suhuai's strength had reached? Judging from the blow just now, Nan Suhuai was definitely not below his level. This was going to be difficult. Although the number of people on both sides was about the same, there was almost no one on their side who could continue fighting. On the other hand, the people on the other side still had the strength to fight. If they really chose to fight head-on, they would definitely be the ones at a disadvantage. Luo Yan took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, and cupped his hands at Nan Suhuai. So it's Dean Nan. I think Dean Nan has misunderstood what happened just now. Actually, I don't have any other intentions. It's just that there was some conflict between these juniors, and I wanted them to talk things out. Nan Suhuai's seniority was higher than his, and he had broken through to the Supreme God realm earlier than him. Therefore, in front of Nan Suhuai, he couldn't even say the two words, "this lord." Unfortunately, Nan Suhuai snorted disdainfully at his words. Luo Yan, do you really think this old man's eyesight is bad because of old age? Just now, how did you bully you? This old man clearly saw it. Misunderstanding. Don't you think it's funny when you hear this? Nan Suhuai's words were laced with sarcasm. Obviously, He didn't intend to leave Luo Yan any face. Luo Yan's face turned even darker. Dean Nan, I explained it to you properly, but you didn't appreciate it. Isn't this a little too much? Whether it's this old man speaking nonsense, or you using your power to bully others, isn't it still a different story? Nan Suhui sneered. No matter what, you are still a dignified supreme god expert. How could you be so ruthless to a junior? If news of this spreads, Luo Yan, I wonder if you still want to keep your face? You. Luo Yan's face flushed red and white, but he couldn't think of any rebuttal. He didn't think so much, and only wanted to help Nan Yi vent her anger. Who knew that Shang Guanyu's attitude would be so unyielding and stubborn that he had no choice but to make a move. In the end, Nan Suhui happened to see it. Nan Suhui had been a powerful figure in the Divine Ruins world for many years, and was also the dean of Lingxiao College. He had seen countless geniuses, but he had only accepted one disciple. One could imagine how picky he was. Moreover, he was famous for being protective of his disciples. Even they, who didn't have much contact with Lingxiao College, had heard of it. Seeing this scene, Nan Suhui obviously wouldn't let it go. Dean Nan, since you're here, it's good that you're here. Let's settle our previous debts together. Luo Yan raised his hand and pointed at Nan Yi and the others. Your precious disciple has injured our people to such an extent, and she hasn't even said a word of apology until now. What do you think of this, Dean Nan? Nan Suhui's gaze swept across the few of them before he squinted and turned to look at Chu Luiyue. Did you do this? Chu Luiyue said calmly. Half of it. Nan Suhui was stunned. What do you mean half of it? Chu Luiyue raised her chin a little and seemed to smile as she slowly said, That's right. Half of it is because they provoked us, and the other half is because they were unlucky enough to provoke another god. Luo Yan was the first to change his expression. He immediately looked at Nan Yi. You met a venerable god before? Why didn't you say this? They knew how difficult it was to deal with a goddess. Although Elder Wu Peng and Elder Bai Tong were of high status, one was a weapon refiner, and the other was a celestial physician. If they really fought, they might not be a match for her goddess. Nan Yi hesitated and seemed to be in a dilemma. Do you know where her goddess came from? No matter what, this debt couldn't be settled just like that. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. I've already killed her goddess. You won't be able to find her even if you look for her. Forget it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1691. As soon as he finished speaking, there was dead silence. Chu Luiyue's expression didn't change as she smiled and said, Oh right. Oh that's right. Speaking of which, I did you guys a favor. Not only did you not thank me, but you guys kept finding trouble with me. How interesting. The atmosphere became even stranger. For a moment, Luo Yan didn't know what kind of expression to show. His expression was awkward and stiff. He quickly glanced at Nan Yi and the others, and his heart sank slightly. He knew Nan Yi and the others too well. Since Shang Guanyu had said so, although their expressions were ugly, they didn't look shocked. This proved that this matter was most likely true. Nan Yi finally couldn't help but refute. Who knows if you were the one who killed that person? If you guys used any tricks? It's my ability to use tricks, isn't it? Chu Luiyue interrupted her with a smile. The process wasn't important. The result was the most important. Nan Yi choked. Luo Yan took a deep breath. A high god killed a high god. How is that possible? He had never heard of such a thing in the entire Divine Ruins world. Nan Suhui was also shocked and hurriedly asked. Is what you said true? Chu Luiyue blinked. Master, when have I ever lied to you? Rong Xiao, father, and Dumpling can all testify for me. Nan Suhui cursed in his heart. How many times have you lied to me? But he obviously couldn't say that now. Rong Xiao nodded. You is telling the truth. The reason why we came here this time was because that person wanted to use Lord Chu Ning's life to threaten you. He wanted to kill you, but he was killed instead. He was killed instead. Even Nan Suhui couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Listen to that. Is this what a human should say? A high god killed a high god. Only you guys can say such things so calmly. However, despite his shock, Nan Suhui quickly accepted this matter. Ever since he had accepted Yu as his disciple, he knew that as long as he was with her, there was nothing impossible in this world. This girl had even repaired the Tianxua formation. What was so strange about her killing a god? At this moment, Nan Suhui didn't find it strange at all. He only had one thought left in his mind. Sometimes, when a disciple is too hardworking, it really tests the heart of a master. He was silent for a while, then gave Chu Liyue a thumbs up and said seriously, "You are well done. You are indeed worthy of being my disciple. When you get back, you have to tell master what exactly is going on." Chu Liyue agreed. Sure. Seeing the happy appearance of the master and disciple, Luo Yin only felt as if there was a string in his brain that suddenly tightened. What time was it now that they were actually discussing these things directly? These people were really going too far. Each and every one of them did not put them in their eyes at all. Everything is just your side of the story. How can we believe it? He finally couldn't hold it in anymore and reprimanded coldly. This voice finally reminded Nan Suhui of their existence. He chuckled. Then what you said just now was also just your side of the story, wasn't it? Why should we believe you? This sentence finally caused the two sides to fall into a stalemate again. Nanny bit her lip tightly. She had never thought that things would develop to this point. Wasn't it just dealing with Sheng Guanyu? Why was it so difficult? Even now, she hadn't even taken revenge, and had even implicated Uncle Luo Yan. She wasn't stupid. The sudden appearance of this old man made Uncle Luo Yan very wary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have suppressed his anger and spoken so politely just now. Unfortunately, the two sides still didn't seem to be able to come to an agreement. Nanny stole a quick glance at Luo Yan. Based on her past experience, this matter definitely wouldn't go according to what she had thought before. But she wasn't willing to accept it. Nanny reached out and grabbed Luo Yan's sleeve, speaking in an extremely low voice. "Uncle Luo Yan, that thing is on her." Luo Yan was shocked and stared at her. "Really?" Nanny pursed her lips and nodded. How would I dare to joke about such a thing? Previously, Elder Wu Peng used the Great Star Disk to investigate, and the result was the same. Otherwise, we wouldn't have left and come back. Luo Yan's expression changed quickly, and he finally looked at Chu Liyue. Originally, he wanted to make peace with the other party. After all, Nan Suhui wasn't someone to be trifled with. But if it was really as Nanny said, he was afraid that this matter would have to be reconsidered. Although Nan Yi's voice was very low, no one present was an ordinary person, and everyone heard it clearly. Chu Liyue's eyes were tinged with fatigue and impatience. Even if they weren't annoyed, she was. "I'll say it for the last time. I don't know what you're looking for, and that thing isn't on me. Now either you apologize or continue to fight. You can choose one." With Nan Suhui around, they had a high chance of winning. Of course, they weren't afraid of fighting with them. Nan Suhui frowned. What are they talking about? Chu Liyue shook her head. If she knew, she wouldn't have to play riddles with them here. After a moment, Luo Yan took a step forward. "I have a suggestion. Sheng Guanyu, if you're willing to accept my investigation and confirm that the thing is indeed not on you, we can immediately apologize to you and prepare a generous gift to express our apology. If you're unwilling, then I'm afraid today's matter will be delayed for a long time." These words were half a negotiation and half a threat. Chu Liyue frowned and was a little unhappy. Nan Suhui's face turned cold. "Luo Yan, I agree," Chu Liyue suddenly said. She thought about this suggestion carefully and felt that she wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Although they had a high chance of winning with her master around, their background wasn't simple. If they really shed all pretense of cordiality, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess in the end. It would be best if this matter could be resolved easily. She took a step forward. "Please. Digression, it's Christmas Eve. Let's all be safe and happy. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love." Chapter 1692. Luo Yin looked at her deeply, raised his hand, and drew a small arc in front of him. A stream of light flashed, and a palm-sized compass appeared out of thin air. At the same time, a totem was faintly discernible between his brows. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. By the way, don't forget about the conditions that you mentioned earlier. Luo Yin said indifferently. Of course. As he spoke, he gently brushed his hands over the compass. A moment later, the needle on the compass suddenly shook violently. Seeing this, Chu Luiyue frowned slightly, and a trace of inexplicable uneasiness appeared in her heart. This thing's reaction seemed to be really abnormal. Finally, the needle stopped. It pointed straight at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Luo Yin suddenly raised his head, and his gaze was as sharp as a knife. Shang Guanyu, what else do you have to say? The evidence was conclusive. It couldn't be more obvious. That thing was indeed on her. Chu Luiyue's hands quickly clenched in her sleeves. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. How could this be? What exactly were they looking for? Why were they so sure that it was on her? Chu Luiyue didn't think that Luo Yin had done something to deliberately make the needle point at her. At this time, Luo Yin should want to solve this matter more smoothly than them. After all, they didn't have any advantage. If they continued to be entangled, it would only be more disadvantageous for them. He didn't have to do this at all. That meant she really had the thing they were looking for? Dean Nan, I'm sorry. Today, Shangguan, you must hand over the thing. Luo Yin shouted sternly, and then his figure disappeared from the spot. A strong gust of wind suddenly swept over. Chu Luiyue was alarmed. Luo Yin, how dare you? Seeing this, Nan Suhui immediately attacked. Rong Xiu grabbed Chu Luiyue's waist and quickly retreated with her. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a chill from behind. She quickly turned around and saw a familiar face. It was Luo Yin. This is his divine body. Rong Xiu reacted quickly and attacked without hesitation. However, Luo Yin was a god, and he had summoned his divine body. He was determined to take down Chu Luiyue. He quickly dodged Rong Xiu's attack. With a wave of his sleeve, several silver needles with a cold luster flew out. Those silver needles were about an inch long and sharp. In the blink of an eye, they had surrounded Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue raised his sword to block. Clang! Clang! Sharp sounds of collisions rang out one after another. Although those silver needles were small, they contained extremely strong power. After such a fierce attack, Chu Luiyue's sword-wielding hands were numb. Even the webbing between his thumb and forefinger had split open and was bleeding. Rong Xiu was about to come over when he was blocked by Luo Yan's divine body. Just as Chu Luiyue thought that everything was over, the silver needles that she had blocked earlier suddenly changed directions and attacked her again. Moreover, their speed and strength seemed to be even stronger than before. Shocked, Chu Luiyue faced them again. The continuous attacks forced her to continuously dodge and retreat. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her back. She had nowhere to retreat and crashed into a black wall. The wall was rough, and when she was pressed tightly against it, she felt a stinging pain. With a thought, Chu Luiyue already had a black shield in her hand. All the silver needles were blocked outside. They couldn't even leave a mark on it. Luo Yan's expression changed. That black shield, taking advantage of his distraction, Rong Xiu quickly attacked. A cluster of golden flames transformed into a whip and tightly bound his divine body. Luo Yin didn't think much of it and sneered. Even with the power of a god you dare. Suddenly, his voice came to an abrupt stop. Because he realized that his divine body couldn't break free from Rong Xiu's fire whip. The more he struggled, the more intense the burning pain on his body was. You! Luo Yin looked at Rong Xiu in shock and anger. Looking into those bottomless eyes, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. And because he was stunned for a moment, he didn't see the thick black color that was silently surging in the golden flames that tightly bound him. However, just as the situation gradually became clear, Chu Luiyue glanced out of the corner of her eye, and her heart instantly tightened. Nan Yuxing was suddenly running toward Chu Ning. His face was gloomy, and he was exuding a terrifying murderous intent. At the same time, a saber appeared in his hand. The saber was wide and thick, and the tip of the saber was suffused with a strange blue light. It was poisonous. Father, be careful. Chu Luiyue immediately planned to move and run in that direction. However, a figure was rapidly closing in on him again. It was none other than Nanny. At this moment, her expression was ferocious, and her eyes were filled with murderous intent. But the most shocking thing was that the pressure on her body was suddenly much stronger than before. This wasn't her aura. Almost instantly, Chu Luyue understood what was going on. This force definitely didn't belong to Nanny. In a flash, Nanny clenched the triangular pyramid in her hand and stabbed it fiercely toward Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue's body tensed up in an instant. The power of a god. Go to hell. Nanny gritted her teeth and said in a low voice. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of her teeth, carrying deep hatred and resentment. Chu Luyue didn't hesitate and directly raised the black shield. It blocked in front of him. Whoosh! A sharp, ear-piercing sound rang out, almost making one's scalp tingle. The tyrannical power surged over, and Chu Luyue's body crashed heavily against the wall behind him once again. It seemed like she had hit something sharp, and a wound appeared on her shoulder and back. Chu Luyue clenched his teeth tightly as the blood in his body surged. Nanny still seemed a little dissatisfied. This triangular pyramid was specially given to her by her father for self-defense before she left home. Previously, she couldn't bear to take it out and use it. It was only when she saw that Chu Luyue was alone that she had an idea and decided to take advantage of this opportunity to attack her. However, she had originally thought that this attack would be able to take Shanghai Yu's life directly. Nanny gritted her teeth and waved the triangular pyramid again indignantly. Even if she couldn't pierce through this strange shield, the power left behind by her father was enough to make Shanghai Yu suffer. However, just as the triangular pyramid was about to land on the black shield again, the sound of a zither suddenly came from afar. The sound of the zither seemed to come from a very far place. But when it landed in her ears, it was extremely clear. The most shocking thing was that the sound of the zither carried an undisguised strong murderous intent. It caused Nanny's mind to be in a mess, and her entire body to turn numb. Although it was just a sound, she seemed to have smelled a strong smell of blood. She subconsciously stopped what she was doing and looked up. That sound was coming from here. She saw that the black wall behind Chu Luyue suddenly glowed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1693. What's going on? For some reason, an indescribable sense of fear suddenly surged from the bottom of Nanny's heart as she looked at the flowing light. Even though she didn't know what it was, she still keenly felt the terrifying danger. She didn't even think about it and immediately retreated. At the same time, Chu Luyue also heard the sound of the zither. She looked up and happened to see Nanny staring at the wall behind her with a horrified expression. Her eyes were filled with fear. It was as if she had seen something extremely terrifying. When Nanny started to retreat, Chu Luyue finally turned around to take a look. However, what she saw stunned her for a moment, because she suddenly realized that these streams of light were constantly gathering, as if they were forming some kind of totem. And for some reason, she felt that it was a little familiar. She frowned and took a few steps back. She wanted to take a closer look at the giant totem and see what it looked like. However, just as she raised her foot, a tyrannical suction force suddenly came from the wall. Her body immediately rushed forward uncontrollably. In the next moment, her figure completely disappeared behind the wall. Before everyone could react, they saw a white figure quickly hiding behind the wall. It was Rongxiao. In addition, there was also a small figure who was only half a step behind Rongxiao. She also raised her foot and rushed over. That was Dumpling. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the three figures quickly disappeared just like that. This scene shocked everyone present. Wasn't that just a wall? Why did it suddenly devour the three of them? It didn't even leave them any time to react. Nan Suhui frowned and looked over. Only then did he see that several streams of light had appeared on the black wall. They intertwined with each other and seemed to be outlining a certain pattern. The power on it was so shocking that even the void around the wall was shaking. Nan Suhui stopped fighting and wanted to rush in. Halfway through, he suddenly heard a figure. President Nan. Nan Suhui turned around. Yours father, Chu Ning? Chu Ning immediately nodded with a worried expression. Is Dean Nan going in as well? I wonder if Chu Ning can go with you? He was truly worried about Yuer. Although Rong Xiao and Dumpling had already followed them in, this incident was too strange, and he was still worried. If they could move together, it should be able to reduce a lot of unnecessary trouble. Nan Suhui nodded without hesitation. Then let's go together. After saying that, the two of them really moved forward and entered the black wall. The originally chaotic and noisy scene quickly quieted down. Luo Yan recalled his divine body and looked at the black wall with a frown. In fact, when he arrived here, he noticed this wall at first glance, but because all his attention was on Nan Yi and Sheng Guanyu, he didn't pay much attention to it. However, from the looks of it, there was indeed something fishy about this wall. What happened just now? Nan Yuxing couldn't help but murmur in shock. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Everything was fine just a moment ago. How did everyone suddenly disappear? Luo Yan took a step forward and seemed to be planning to go in as well. Nanny hurriedly grabbed his sleeve. Uncle Luo Yan, you can't go in. Luo Yan saw her panicked expression and only thought that she was frightened by the sudden scene. So he patted her shoulder and said, the thing is still with Sheng Guanyu. Don't worry, I'll go get it and come back immediately. Nanny still refused to let go and shook her head nervously. No, you can't go in. You really can't go in. Uncle Luo Yan, it's too dangerous inside. At this moment, Luo Yan realized that her eyes were filled with fear, and her body was trembling slightly. She seemed to be really scared. Could it be that she saw something just now? Luo Yan frowned. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Nanny shook her head. I don't know either, but I just feel that something is wrong inside. Uncle Luo Yan, why don't we wait outside? Anyway, they will come out sooner or later, won't they? It's the same to wait for them to come out. Luo Yan frowned even more. No one could guarantee when Sheng Guanyu and the others would come out after going in. Moreover, what if they didn't come out? At that time, it wouldn't be so easy to find them and take back the item. But Nanny was rarely so scared, and it really made him feel uneasy. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, his heart ached for Nanny. Okay, then let's not go in. We'll just wait here. Before he could finish his sentence, another terrifying suction force swept over from the wall. The figures of the few people were quickly swallowed up. Not long after, all the figures in the area had completely disappeared. The wilderness once again regained its usual silence. Darkness. Endless darkness. Chu Luiyue only felt her body falling continuously. She was surrounded by a thick black color that couldn't be dissolved. It was quiet, and only the sound of the wind whistling past her ears. Fortunately, this situation didn't last for long. She felt her body fall onto a piece of land. The ground was soft and the fall wasn't heavy. Chu Luiyue stood up and was about to take out a pearl to illuminate the place, when a faint light suddenly leaked from above her head. She looked up. There seemed to be a blue-black sky above her head, like the sky in the middle of the night. However, right in the middle, there was an opening that had been cut open by something. Light seeped through and sprinkled on Chu Luiyue's body. It was also this light that allowed Chu Luiyue to see the surrounding scenery clearly. There was no scenery. All she saw was a piece of black land. Other than that, there was nothing else. She could only see the appearance of the area within 100 steps. Everything further away was still hidden in the darkness, and it was difficult to approach and grasp. Rong Xiao. Chu Luiyue called out softly. Before entering, she vaguely saw that Rong Xiao seemed to be following her closely. But now, it seemed that he wasn't with her. Chu Luiyue called out twice more, but there was still no response. This was expected. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and didn't care too much. But where was Dumpling? 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 Chu Luiyue called out Dumpling a few more times, but there was no response. The surroundings were quiet. Chu Luiyue's hands slowly clenched. Dumpling was her contracted divine beast, and they were telepathic. Even if they were separated by a distance, they could still sense each other. But now, she couldn't even detect Dumpling's breath. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1694. Was it because they were so far apart that they couldn't sense each other? Or was there something that forcibly cut off the connection between them? Chulua didn't know. She put away the black shield, but still held the scarlet heaven sword tightly in her hand. After resting for a while, and adjusting the breath in her body, Chulua lifted her feet and walked forward. She randomly chose a direction. After all, she couldn't tell any direction in this place. Instead of waiting in place, and relying on a glimmer of hope to wait for Rong Xiao and the others to come, she might as well go find them herself. Even if she couldn't find them in a short time, it would be good to know more about this place. Thus, Chulua stepped on the road alone. Along the way, the faint smell of blood lingered at the tip of her nose. If Chulua wasn't so sensitive to this smell, she might not have noticed it. Unfortunately, she had never been able to identify where this smell came from. It was as if the air here had been filled with this smell. The surroundings were quiet. Chulua could only hear her own footsteps and her heartbeat. At a certain moment, she suddenly stopped and looked ahead. At this moment, the crack on the top of his head was much wider than before. More light shone in, allowing Chulua to see further. In front of her was still a vast expanse. However, Chulua's heart suddenly beat faster, because the sound of the zither that had been lingering in her ears suddenly disappeared at this moment. She unconsciously clenched the scarlet heaven sword, and the blood in her body seemed to flow faster. She opened her mouth, only to find that her throat was dry and tight. Tap, tap, tap. An unfamiliar sound of footsteps suddenly came from the darkness. The footsteps were slow and calm, as if taking a stroll. However, every step seemed to be stepping on Chulua's heart. She seemed to have a premonition, and her whole body tensed up. Finally, a figure appeared in her line of sight. At the same time, a casual voice with a smile fell into her ears. "You're finally here." On the other side, after Rong Xiao followed Chulua in, the surroundings also fell into darkness. But soon a white light flashed past his eyes. His heart trembled as he looked over. That ray of white light was actually spreading rapidly not far from him. Then the light quickly condensed into a huge mirror. Everything around them was pitch black, but the appearance of the mirror instantly tore the darkness apart. A faint light was emitted from the mirror. The mirror was huge and wide. At a glance, one could not see the edges of it. It was as if it was completely embedded in the darkness, and had become one with the surrounding darkness. It stood quietly in front of Rong Xiao. The surroundings were silent, and even the sound of the wind seemed to have stopped. Rong Xiao looked up slightly. A figure appeared in the mirror. The lines of his cheeks were smooth, and his appearance was pure and enchanting. He had sword-like eyebrows, a high nose bridge and thin crimson lips. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't meticulously carved by the heavens. Compared to him, it seemed that everything in the world was dim in color. The figure reflected in the mirror was Rong Xiao. However, it was not exactly the same as Rong Xiao at this moment. Rong Xiao was dressed in white, and his eyes were clear and gentle. He was elegant and charming. However, the person in the mirror was dressed in a black robe. His eyes were deep and dense, and he was majestic and full of vigor. They clearly had the same appearance and figure, but they looked like two completely different people. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes slightly, but there was no shock on his face. It seemed that he had expected this. He raised his hand, and a golden flame gushed out from his palm, jumping happily. Almost at the same time, the person in the mirror also raised his hand, and a cluster of flame appeared at his fingertips. However, the flame was thick and black. Rong Xiao knitted his brows slightly, but they quickly relaxed as his thin lips curved up slightly. So fast. The person in the mirror looked at him. "Since you're here, you should have expected this scene. Besides, you've delayed for too long." He paused and raised his eyebrows. "This time, are you going to break through, or continue to suppress yourself at the high deity level like before?" Rong Xiao gently closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were golden and black flames in his eyes. The smile on his lips deepened. "Break. Are you? In a dark space, Dumpling shouted anxiously as she walked. However, no matter how she shouted, she didn't get any response. The surrounding silence was terrifying. The rims of Tuanzi's eyes were red and filled with tears. She quickly wiped her eyes, clenched her small fists and cheered herself on. It wasn't that Ayu didn't want her anymore, but she was swallowed into this strange wall. As long as she continued to search, she would definitely find Ayu. Besides, Ayu might also be looking for her. Thinking of this, Tuanzi was motivated again and quickened her pace to move forward. Nan Suhui and Chu Ning came in together, so they were still in the same place. However, they were also trapped in a space and didn't meet anyone else. Therefore, they could only search for an exit while trying to contact others. Chu Luiyue stared at the figure in front of her. Almost at first glance, she was certain that this person was the one she had seen before, the one playing the guqin. However, although they were closer, the other person's figure was still shrouded in a layer of black shadow. It was hazy and couldn't be seen clearly. Chu Luiyue couldn't even tell whether the other person was a man or a woman, because the voice was as ethereal as the zither, as if it came from far away. The tone was very light, but the voice was beautiful and dreamy. Listening to it made one feel relaxed and comfortable, but it was elusive. Chu Luiyue felt that this scene was really strange. At this moment, she couldn't see the other person's appearance and figure. Even the voice sounded like a dream. It was hard to tell if it was real or fake. However, the other person said such a sentence to her. It seemed like they knew her and had been waiting for her. Chu Luiyue asked tentatively, "You know me?" The person seemed to smile and said casually, "You're holding my zither score. Of course I recognize it." Zither score? Chu Luiyue was stunned. I didn't. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of shock flashed across her eyes. The only thing on her that was related to the zither sound was probably that water droplet. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiyue felt a strange wave coming from her dantian. The person opposite her raised his hand slightly. That water droplet rushed out of Chu Luiyue's body instantly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1695. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Her pupils constricted, and her heart was in her throat. However, the water droplet didn't go far away. It just floated quietly in front of her. Although the surrounding light was dim, the water droplet was still bright and dazzling. "Don't worry. Now that it has recognized you as its master, I won't take it back." The voice of the person opposite her had a teasing tone. Chu Luiyue relaxed and calmed the waves in her heart. She cupped her fists and bowed respectfully to the person opposite her. "I lost my composure for a moment. Please forgive me, senior." She could now confirm that this person was indeed the previous owner of the water droplet. No one had ever been able to summon the water droplet away so easily. This person was really her senior. The other party laughed again. "It's your chance to get this thing. I'm no longer its master. It's just that I haven't seen it for so long that I miss it." As he spoke, Chu Luiyue saw the water droplet sway gently. Then it gradually extended into a transparent remnant page. No, actually, it couldn't be considered transparent at this time. On it, several dazzling streams of light were flowing slowly and brilliantly. Chu Luiyue was slightly stunned. This thing was actually a guqin score? For the past few years, she had been completely unaware of it. As if seeing through her thoughts, the person opposite her smiled and said, "This is only one of the pages. There's only a small section of incomplete music score on it. It can't be played. It's normal that you don't recognize it." Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. However, she was still rather surprised. When she got this thing, she could tell that it seemed to be a page that was forcibly torn from a book. She had a lot of guesses about its origin. However, she really didn't expect it to be a guqin score. "I thought you would have come earlier. I didn't expect it to take so long." As the person spoke, his fingertips moved. A transparent book suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was flowing with brilliant colors and brilliant light. Chu Luiyue's eyes hurt from the light. He subconsciously turned his face away and narrowed his eyes. However, she did not raise her hand to cover her eyes. She would rather endure the pain in her eyes and stare at the book, afraid that she would miss something. She didn't even need to think to know that this book must be the zither score that the other party had mentioned earlier. That page must belong to this book. This music score has been with me for many years. Now I can finally find a new owner for it. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She had always wanted to find the rest of the items, but she never had the chance. Who would have thought that all of this would be laid out right in front of her? However, this book is actually not complete. The other party's sudden change in topic made Chu Liyue's heart sink slightly. Back then, they tore this good zither score into 3 pieces. Now, other than the 2 portions here, even I don't know the whereabouts of the remaining portion. That person shook his head regretfully. When Chu Liyue heard this, she felt that something was wrong. Back then? Trespass. This zither score, wait. A white light suddenly flashed in Chu Liyue's mind. Taizu once said that tens of thousands of years ago, the earth-shattering battle where the gods fell seemed to be for a book. Could it be this is the book? This is the book. That person said with a faint smile. Chu Liyue was shocked. She clearly didn't say anything just now, and her expression was very calm. However, why did the other party seem to know all of her thoughts like the back of his hand? This is my place. Naturally, I can peek into some of your thoughts. However, you don't have to worry too much. I can only sense a part of it, and it's mostly related to this zither score. As for the other thoughts that you've hidden deeply, it's hard for me to know. Of course, I'm not interested in those. Chu Liyue heaved a sigh of relief. She did not doubt his words at all. With the other party's strength, it was really easy for him to deal with her. There was no need for him to beat around the bush. I've embarrassed myself in front of Senior. Chu Liyue's attitude was very proper, and she bowed politely. She knew very well that in front of such a person, any tricks would be useless. He might as well do it openly and honestly. However, this time, the waves in her heart didn't stop for a long time. It was obvious how precious this zither score was for so many high gods, and even venerables to fight for it. She had been very emotional before, but she didn't expect that the treasure that once caused chaos in the world was in her hands. Although it was only an incomplete part, there were many cultivators in the world who wanted to get this page, but they couldn't find it. When she thought of this, Chu Liyue's heart beat faster, and her blood seemed to be boiling. She knew that this thing was extraordinary. However, after knowing the truth, she was still shocked. The other party seemed to be satisfied with Chu Liyue's reaction. Although this zither score was divided into 3 parts, there is still a connection between them. Since the one in your hand was the first to awaken and let you be the master, the other 2 parts will naturally follow you and let you be the master. The 3rd part has been lost for a long time, and it won't be found in a short time. Let's not talk about it for now. You can take my share first. Chu Liyue had already guessed the other party's plan, but when she heard this, she was still surprised. Such a precious treasure was actually given to her so easily. You don't have to feel burdened. Although I was its previous master, I'm now just a remnant consciousness in this zither score. Even if this zither score is complete, it's meaningless to leave it with me. The reason I've waited until now is to wait for a new master to appear. The other party's voice paused. Chu Liyue immediately felt a gaze on her. She immediately tensed up. In other words, it's you. Chu Liyue clenched her fists. So the zither music from before was you luring me here? That's right. It's a pity that those people have been pestering you and wasting a lot of time. It's really annoying. Chu Liyue could hear a trace of impatience in the other party's voice. However, I've already chased them away. At least before you complete the fusion of these 2 zither scores, they won't disturb you again. At this point, Chu Liyue finally understood. The only thing she had to do now was to do as the other party said, and reintegrate these 2 incomplete zither scores. It's just 1, so it shouldn't be difficult, right? Chu Liyue thought, and immediately cupped her fists at the other party. Thank you for your generous gift, Senior. Don't be happy too early. The other party interrupted her with a smile. It won't be too late to thank me when you really do it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1696. For some reason, Chu Luiyue heard a hint of mockery in his words, as well as a hint of anticipation for a good show. She swallowed the rest of her words. Yes, I will do my best. Swish. As soon as she finished speaking, the person opposite her waved his sleeve, and the transparent book quickly flew in front of Chu Luiyue. It floated quietly in front of her, one on the left and one on the right. Chu Luiyue's eyes scanned the book carefully. Although one of the two items was a thick book, and the other was a thin piece of paper, the aura they exuded was not much different. Furthermore, after approaching the book, she was able to sense a familiar feeling from it. They were of the same origin, so it was no wonder. Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something and looked up. How should I address you, senior? She had been here for so long, and the book belonged to him. She couldn't possibly not know his name. The person opposite her was silent for a moment, as if deep in thought. After a while he said, "It's been too long, and I can't remember many things clearly. You can call me Ajing." Ajing? This name was very vague, and she couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Chu Luiyue was pondering in her heart when she heard the person opposite her say bluntly, "I'm a man." Chu Luiyue. She almost forgot that he could spy on many of her thoughts. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt awkward. Yes, Senior Ajing. Fortunately, the other party didn't seem to care much about this matter. He waved his sleeve and sat on the ground. A zither suddenly appeared on his lap. Then, Chu Luiyue saw him gently place his hand on the zither. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched violently, and an ominous premonition surged in her heart. Senior Ajing, are you going to play the zither? Ajing looked at her strangely. Of course. Since you want to combine these two pieces of music, of course you have to have the help of the zither. If you don't even know the music, how can you perfectly combine them? Chu Luiyue understood. You mean that I have to understand this song before I can? Ajing nodded with satisfaction. You're not too stupid. In that case, he should be able to learn it quickly. Although it sounded like a compliment, Chu Luiyue didn't feel happy. Instead, he felt even more uneasy. She clearly remembered that when she heard this song, she was so shocked that she vomited blood. Now the person was right in front of him, and so was the guqin. It was obvious that it was much more powerful than before. But now that things had come to this, she had no choice but to bite the bullet. Thank you, Senior. Chu Luiyue asked after thinking for a while. By the way, Senior Ajing, how long will it take for me to completely integrate these two scores? Rong Xiao and the others followed him in. If it took too long, they would be worried. Ajing's movements paused. He tilted his head and looked her up and down. Although she couldn't see his face and expression clearly, Chu Luiyue still felt that his gaze was as sharp as a steel knife. With just one glance, she felt as if her entire body inside and out had been seen clearly. You're a high god, a doctor, and a high-level weapon refiner. You've also just broken through to a great Xian King master. Your talent and comprehension aren't bad. No wonder it recognized you as its master. He spoke slowly, but it set off perilous waves in Chu Luiyue's heart. This person had only looked at her from afar, and he had already found out everything about her. At this moment, Chu Luiyue even felt that she had no secrets left in front of him. Although the Tianjing Yuan Meridian isn't rare, the support of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's bloodline is rare. A trace of satisfaction finally appeared in Ajing's voice. Chu Luiyue was inwardly speechless when she heard this. The Tianjing Yuan Meridian was a top-grade Yuan Meridian, but it seemed to be sparse and ordinary in his place. There was nothing special about it. Moreover, he said these words in such a calm tone. Chu Luiyue was even more curious about the other party's identity. However, this thought only flashed through her mind before she quickly suppressed it. No matter what, the most important thing now was to merge these two zither scores. If everything goes smoothly, it will be over in about 180 years. However, if something goes wrong in the middle, I'm afraid that it will take twice as long. Ajing's tone was incomparably relaxed as he said this. Therefore, you must not let down your guard during this time. Chu Luiyue had been trying hard to maintain a calm expression, but after hearing these two sentences, it finally cracked. What? If everything goes well, 180 years. If it doesn't go well, it will take twice as long. Then wouldn't she have to wait here until the end of time? Jing looked at her with some astonishment. Why? Do you think there's a problem with the time? Chu Liyue's chest tightened. It was more than a problem. There was a huge problem. How old was she now? Was she going to invest 100 years in this? Then what about Rong Xiao and Dumpling? What about her father and master? Not to mention 100 years. Even if it was 10 years, the outside world would be completely different. Senior Jing, can't you shorten the time? Chu Liyue spoke with difficulty. Jing chuckled. This time is already short enough. Without my help, you may not be able to complete it even if you stay here for 500 years. After all, this is not an ordinary zither score. Of course, Chu Liyue knew that this was not an ordinary zither score. However, it could easily take 100 years. If you insist on shortening the time, it's not impossible. As if sensing Chu Liyue's dilemma, Jing paused for a moment and finally relented. Chu Liyue looked up. Jing said, I can help you speed up the flow of time in this space, but correspondingly, the pressure and torture you have to bear will also increase exponentially. Can you still insist on this? Chu Liyue held her breath and nodded seriously. Thank you, senior. Even if she had to go through more pain, and the process was more difficult, she had to do it. After all, she was no longer alone. There were many people who loved her, and were waiting for her. She had to get out as soon as possible. Jing seemed to have expected her choice. He chuckled and shook his head. I hope you won't regret it. Chu Liyue's eyes were cold and stubborn. I won't regret anything I've done in my life. This time, it was the same. Good. Jing suddenly laughed. Since you have the courage, then, let me see if you have the ability. Apart from other things, this little girl's courage was quite to his liking. The key was whether she could do it or not. Clang! He waved his fingertips, and the sound of a zither broke through the air. Chu Liyue felt a chill, and immediately felt the atmosphere around her suddenly change. The sound of the zither was bleak, and the world was filled with killing intent. Digression. Merry Christmas, the New Year's Day event is here. Everyone, are you ready? It starts at midnight on January 1st, and ends at midnight on January 3rd. The event lasts for 3 days. 1. The comments section. Every day 6%, 16%, 26%, 36%, 46%, 56%, 66%, 76%, 86%, 96% will get 66 Xiaoxiang dollars. 2. Every day, choose 3 favorite comments in the comment section and win a share. Finally, recommend Mr. An's new book, Mr. She Wants to Announce It Every Day. Pet article, No Abuse, Strong Woman group favorite. After Ruan Qi became popular. Anti-fans. No matter how beautiful she is, she's uncultured. That afternoon, the best university in China posted on its Weibo. Let me introduce the youngest doctoral supervisor in our university, Professor Ruan Qi. Anti-fans. What's the use of being a top student? In the end, she has to bow down to her sugar daddy. The next day, Ruan Qi appeared at the International Economic Conference. Her name tag was signed, CEO of Chimu Pharmaceutical Group. Anti-fans. She earns so much money, and doesn't even know how to contribute to the country. 3 days later, the official news was released. The latest nuclear submarine has been released. Thank you to the chief designer, Ruan Qi, and all the research and development team. Anti-fans. Can't afford to offend goodbye. After the wedding, a reporter asked Shijio, Ninth Master, how did you get Goddess Ruan? Shijio silently opened a diary. Wife chasing diary 1. Make a ranking for my baby. 2. Vote for my baby. 3. Show support for my baby. 4. Book the entire theater for my baby's movie. 5. Join my baby's fan club. As everyone knew, Goddess Ruan had a super rich fan. Ninth Master Shijio. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1697. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately became alert. She knew how terrifying the sound of the zither was. She had vomited blood when she was outside the wall, let alone now. The two of them were so close, and the only thing she could do was accept it. Moreover, according to Senior Jing, if she wanted to combine the two pieces of music, she had to understand the music first. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Then, in the midst of the clanging music, she raised her hand and reached for the book. However, just as her fingertips touched the side of the transparent book, the latter suddenly flew up. Whoosh! Chu Liyue looked up instinctively, only to see countless transparent pages scattered all over the sky. That book had actually scattered just like that. In an instant, all she could see were the transparent pages glowing with a faint, gorgeous light. They were scattered messily and randomly in every corner of the space, almost filling the entire space. Chu Liyue looked around, and there were flashing lights everywhere. It was extremely gorgeous. However, this scene caused her heart to instantly surge with an intense uneasiness. Actually, there are only 3 pieces of music in that book. In that booklet, except for one real one, the rest were all fake. If you want to perfectly combine the 2 pieces of music, the first step is to find the real one among the tens of thousands of pieces. Jing's voice was still casual, but in Chu Liyue's ears, it was no different from a sudden clap of thunder. It shocked her to the core. Only one piece among the tens of thousands of pieces was real? How long would she have to search? Most importantly, she didn't even know how to distinguish the real from the fake. Actually, you don't have to worry about this. The first piece of music is with you, and it has already recognized you as its owner. It will be much easier to find the second piece. However, the differences between these pieces of music are very small, so you have to look at each piece carefully. Although most of these pieces of music are fake, looking at each piece requires a lot of force and mental strength. With your current strength, you should be able to finish one in 3 days. That was also the reason why he said that he would need 100 years to complete this task. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched violently. 1 every 3 days. There were tens of thousands of them here. Who knew how long it would take? Needless to say, this was only the first step. In the face of Chu Liyue's silence, Jing thought for a moment and comforted him. It's okay. Practice makes perfect. In the future, your reading speed will definitely become faster and faster. With his status and personality, it was rare for him to say such comforting words. If it weren't for the fact that Chu Liyue was the only heir to this score, he would never have been so kind and patient. However, these words obviously had no effect on Chu Liyue. She closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. After a long silence, she accepted reality. Since they had already come this far, there was no turning back. Then, he could only hope that it would be completed quickly. With a thought, she recalled the remnant page that belonged to her back into her body. Probably because it sensed the existence of the second score. It didn't turn into a water droplet this time. Instead, it remained in the form of a remnant page, floating quietly in her dantian. On it, flowing light flashed and energy surged. Chu Liyue exhaled softly and reached out her hand. A transparent piece of paper nearby floated into her hand. The first one. At the same time, the sound of the zither also fell clearly into her ears. The killing intent was biting cold. In a mountain range thousands of miles away, there were continuous mountains and mist lingering around them. The rich energy of heaven and earth filled it, adding a bit of celestial aura. Especially the tallest mountain in the middle. It was steep and tall, majestic and beautiful. At a glance, it really looked like a fairyland. On the mountain, there were steps that went up from the bottom to the top. At the top of the mountain, there was a mountain gate piled up with stones. A wooden plaque hung horizontally on it. Wugo Peak. This was the most noble of the 18 peaks of the Nan family. Almost all of the important figures of the Nan family were gathered here. Ordinary people didn't even have the right to take a few steps, let alone go up the mountain. On Wugo Peak, there were many courtyards scattered in picturesque disorder. All of the noble people of the Nan family lived there. At the top of the mountain, there was a magnificent building. At this moment, a tall and burly figure was standing in front of the door, looking from afar. This person was the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan. He looked to be about 40 years old. Although there were already traces of age on his face, one could still see some of the handsomeness of his youth. In particular, the reddish-purple brocade robe, and the aura around him made him look even more noble and arrogant. He stood there, looking into the distance with his hands behind his back, as if waiting for something. Head, first young master and second young mistress haven't sent back any news. I'm afraid you won't be able to wait until today. Why don't you go back and rest first? Behind Nan Yifan, an old man who looked like a servant advised. I know. Nan Yifan nodded. It's just that they've been gone for quite some time this time. I do miss Yi a little. Come to think of it, Yi had never left him for such a long time in the past. I wonder if everything went well on their side. After all, it was not a small matter. It was impossible for him not to be worried. The old servant narrowed his weathered eyes with a smile. With first young master and the two elders around, you don't have to worry. Besides, second young mistress has always been clever and intelligent. Isn't the task you've given her a piece of cake? Don't worry. Hearing his words, Nan Yifan's face also revealed a smug and doting smile. He only had this one daughter. She was beautiful and talented, so of course he doted on her very much. This time, it was rare for him to be so firm with Nanny. But at the end of the day, it was for her own good. Although that child was very dissatisfied with him because of this matter, she should understand his painstaking efforts after a few years when she matured. I hope so. Nan Yifan retracted his gaze and planned to turn around and enter the house. However, he had just taken a step when he suddenly felt something, and his expression changed abruptly. The old servant beside him immediately sensed that something was wrong and asked with concern. Head, what's wrong? He had followed Nan Yifan for several years, and rarely saw such an expression on his face. Nan Yifan clenched his fists, and there seemed to be huge waves in his eyes. Yi's aura suddenly disappeared. As soon as he said that, the old servant's expression changed instantly. How could this be? Nan Yifan quickly pushed the door open and entered. The old man followed closely behind, and immediately locked the door. After entering, Nan Yifan took out a jade pendant. Inside, 4 light spots floated gently. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1698. Seeing this, Nan Yifan finally heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the aura of Nan Yi and the others was stored in it. If anything happened to any of them, this jade pendant would immediately react. Judging from the current situation, these 4 people should still be alive. But why did they suddenly lose contact? Nan Yifan only had 1 son and 1 daughter, and he loved them very much. Therefore, Nan Yifan specially made a lot of preparations to be able to contact them anytime and anywhere. But now the connection was suddenly cut off. How could he not be anxious? Uncle Dan, something must have happened to them, Nan Yifan said resolutely. The old man called Uncle Dan also frowned. What about eldest young master? You. Nan Yifan's face darkened. He can't be contacted either. If not for this, he wouldn't be so nervous. Uncle Dan didn't expect the matter to be so serious, and hurriedly tried to persuade him. Patriarch, don't worry. You see, they're still fine now, aren't they? As for why they can't be contacted, there must be a reason. I'll investigate immediately. With that, he turned around and planned to walk out. Nan Yifan put away the jade pendant and gritted his teeth. There's no need to investigate. Something must have happened in the god-slaying tomb. Other than this, he couldn't think of any other reason. He pondered for a moment, then walked out without any hesitation. I'll go to the god-slaying tomb personally. Uncle Dan was shocked. Patriarch, aren't you in too much of a hurry to go now? The clan. There's no time. Nan Yifan stopped in his tracks, and his face turned even uglier. Even if they encountered any trouble in the past, this has never happened before. This time, they must have encountered great danger. What kind of place is the god-slaying tomb? If we don't go there in time, I'm afraid it will be too late. Uncle Dan wanted to say something but hesitated. He was actually very worried about the situation of those people. But many people in the clan didn't know about them going there this time. If the patriarch went there, the news would definitely spread like wildfire. At that time he was afraid. Uncle Dan, Now is not the time to care about that. If something really happened to Yuxing and Yi. Nan Yifan didn't finish his sentence. But his expression said it all. No matter what the consequences were, as long as she was fine, everything was fine. But if he was gone, then there would be nothing left. At that time, he wouldn't even have the chance to make up for it or regret it. Uncle Dan was shocked and immediately lowered his head. Patriarch is right. This old servant was muddle-headed. Nan Yifan waved his hand. I know you're looking out for the big picture, but this matter involves the god-slaying mound. I'm afraid you can't care about that. He frowned and thought for a moment. Please invite Luo Yan and the others to come with us. Uncle Dan was stunned for a moment. Then he bowed respectfully. Yes, even with Elder Wu Peng and Elder Bai Tong accompanying him, something still happened. Most likely, the situation over there was even more complicated than he had expected. The more people there, the safer it would be. Uncle Dan opened the door and went out. His figure soon disappeared from sight. Nan Yifan paced back and forth, waiting anxiously. This happened too suddenly. They didn't even have time to send out any distress signals before they were directly. What kind of situation was this? Nan Yifan didn't dare to think too much. There had always been various rumors about the god-slaying mound. But the 2 times he had been there in the past, he had been scared but not in danger. So he had always felt that the god-slaying mound was not as scary as the rumors said. Until this time, he began to regret it secretly. It was still a little risky to only send Elder Wu Peng and Elder Bai Tong there. If only he had known. But there was no medicine for regret in this world. The only thing he could do now was to silently pray that those people would be safe before they arrived at the god-slaying mound. Soon, Uncle Dan rushed over with a few people. Nan Yifan quickly glanced around and was stunned. Where's Luo Yan? In the entire Nan family, Luo Yan's combat strength could be ranked in the top 5, and he had always doted on Nan Yi. So this time, Nan Yifan had made up his mind to bring Luo Yan with him from the beginning. Uncle Dan's expression was a little strange. Luo Yan is not here. Not here. He has always been obsessed with cultivation, and rarely goes out. Why is he suddenly not here? Suddenly Nan Yifan's voice stopped. There was only one reason that could make Luo Yan leave so quietly. Could it be? Seeing that he seemed to have guessed it, Uncle Dan nodded helplessly. He seems to have already left for the god-slaying mound. As expected. For a moment, Nan Yifan's mood became even more complicated. Luo Yan had gone, so logically speaking, Yi and the others had gained a great helper. But why did something still happen? And judging from the time, they seemed to have met with an accident after Luo Yan's arrival. This made Nan Yifan even more worried. He suppressed all the emotions that were surging in his chest and abdomen. He didn't hesitate any longer and directly moved out. Uncle Dan, stay here and deal with the family affairs. The rest of you follow me. No matter what, he had to bring Yi and the others back safely. Phoenix Shrine. In the main hall, Yi Zhao sat at the head of the table, and the elders were divided into 2 sides. Only 4 of the 5 elders came today. Elder Yi Gong did not appear here. Yi Zhao glanced at the empty seat. Yi Gong is still not here today? Elder Yi Jiao looked a little embarrassed, and responded in a low voice. Yes. Ever since Yi Ran's accident, First Elder has been sad, and hasn't adjusted his emotions. The few people present had different expressions. How was he sad for Yi Ran? He was clearly sad that his years of hard work had gone up in smoke. All these years, he had devoted himself to nurturing Yi Ran, and had spent a lot of effort. How could he accept such an outcome? Yi Zhao couldn't be bothered to expose him and nodded lightly. Then let him rest well. Anyway, even if he didn't come, it wouldn't affect them much. After that, they reported and summarized some of the clan's matters as usual. Yi Zhao made the decisions one by one. In fact, since the end of the ancestral worship ceremony, nothing major had happened at Phoenix Shrine Mountain. Recently, the children in the clan seemed to be cultivating more diligently than before. Elder Yi Shang smiled and said, probably because they were stimulated by Dumpling at the ancestral worship ceremony. At the mention of Dumpling, a smile appeared on Yi Zhao's icy face. Dumpling is younger than them, but much stronger. Of course, they can't be completely unmoved. It's not bad that they have the heart to catch up. Unfortunately, no one knew when Dumpling would return after leaving. Yi Zhao thought regretfully. Suddenly, a reddish-gold feather floated in the main hall. His expression changed, and he suddenly stood up. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1699. The feather lightly drew a line of words in the air. Grandpa Clan Leader, come save me and Ayu. After seeing the line of words, Yi Zhao's eyes narrowed. Soon, the line of words transformed into a red-gold flame in the air and quietly disappeared. As for the feather, it was destroyed as well. Everyone in the main hall was shocked. This is Dumpling's request for help? Elder Yi Shang asked uncertainly. Yi Zhao's expression was grave. That's right. Who else could send a request for help from so far away other than Dumpling? Looks like something happened to them. If not for the desperate situation, Dumpling would never have taken the initiative to ask for their help. Elder Yu stood up, straightened his collar, and said with a smile, "It's rare that little Dumpling would take the initiative to ask us for help. Of course, we have to support her. Clan Leader, how about I make a trip?" Dumpling had already opened her 4th meridian. As one of the 5 elders, it was easy for him to find Dumpling. Yi Zhao nodded. After they left Phoenix God Mountain, they seemed to have gone straight to the God-slaying mound. Elder Yu nodded. He had just taken a step when he suddenly stopped. Clan Leader, young lord is asking for help. Should we send a few more people? The God-slaying mound was very strange and dangerous. He could not guarantee that he could bring them out safely. Yi Zhao's lips moved, but he did not say anything. It was as though he wanted to say something. The remaining elders looked at each other in dismay. There was nothing to hesitate about. What was the clan leader thinking? Elder Yi Shang also stood up. "Yu, you still have to deal with Fenghuang Valley. Let me go this time." He was the 2nd elder, and was more powerful than the 5th elder, Elder Yu. "Other than that, I will find." "2nd elder, please don't." Elder Yu stroked his chin and sighed. "Most of the matters at Fenghuang Valley have already been settled. Even if I leave now, it will not affect much. Besides, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve her relationship with Tuanzi. If I miss this chance, who knows when I will get another one. Don't snatch it from me." He was the youngest of the 5 great elders, and he had always been straightforward in his words and actions. Over time, everyone had gotten used to it. Elder Yi Shang could not help but laugh and shake his head helplessly. "But how can you do it by yourself?" Or, before he could finish his sentence, Yi Zhao interrupted. "I will go with him." As soon as he finished speaking, the hall instantly fell into silence. The elders looked at each other in dismay. Clearly, they did not expect that he would actually plan to go personally. Elder Yi Shang was stunned for a moment before he asked hesitantly, "Elder Yu, you are going?" Under normal circumstances, Yi Zhao would rarely leave the Divine Phoenix Mountain unless something major happened. After all, he was the clan leader. His every word and action had great influence. Yi Zhao nodded expressionlessly. "This is a serious matter. It is safer for me to go with Yu." He was always a man of his word. His attitude and tone were very firm. The elders in the hall did not stop him. Dumpling was the young lord, and was appointed by their ancestors. They had to protect her no matter what. It was understandable that Yi Zhao would go. After making the decision, Yi Zhao and Elder Yu did not hesitate. They set off for the god-slaying grave. At this point, Chu Liyue naturally had no idea what was happening in the outside world. In the dim space, a ray of light shone down from above. Chu Liyue sat cross-legged and held a transparent piece of paper in his hand. On the paper, dazzling light flashed. It was beautiful. However, Chu Liyue was not in the mood to admire it. Her eyes were fixed on the paper. She carefully observed the trajectory and pattern of the flowing light, afraid that she would miss something. This was actually a very taxing task, and he couldn't afford to slack off at all. At the same time, the force around her was rapidly depleting. She frowned slightly. Her lips were pale, and she looked haggard. However, she still held the paper in her hand tightly. She did not dare to close her eyes and rest. The ground around her was littered with papers. Although they were also transparent, there was no dazzling light on them. Every one of them was cracked and seemed to be useless. Chu Luyue had seen those before. They were fake. They were all fake. Among the tens of thousands of papers, only one was real. She had only seen about 100 of them. How could she find the real one so easily? Here, she was focused on studying every zither score. She almost could not feel the passage of time. Only the increasing pressure and pain on her body constantly reminded her that time was passing by. The only thing worth being happy about was that she was reading faster than before. Previously, she read one every 3 days. Now, she read one every 2.5 days. However, this happiness did not last long, because in addition to holding on to these real and fake music scores, Chu Luyue also had to endure the test of the zither. Since Ah Jing began to play the zither, Chu Luyue was shrouded in a terrifying murderous aura. There was almost no room for relaxation in this song. From beginning to end, it was full of fighting spirit and murderous aura. In a trance, Chu Luyue felt that she was in a vast world. The sky was dark, the clouds were rolling, and the wind was roaring. In the boundless wilderness, countless people were killing each other. Their shouts shook the sky and their momentum was shocking. Looking around, there were messy bloodstains and cold corpses everywhere. Everywhere was filled with a chill. It was like purgatory on earth. She could even smell the strong and terrible smell of blood. It was almost nauseating. It wasn't that she had never seen a battle before. She had even fought on the battlefield herself, killing countless people in the midst of life and death with the flash of her blade and the shadow of her sword. She had seen the scene of corpses strewn all over the place more than once. However, that scene paled in comparison to the scene that was constantly emerging in her mind. It was not worth mentioning at all. She wanted to throw all these images out of her mind, but it was in vain. Because all of this was a part of the song. Therefore, she could only choose to accept it. She constantly forced herself to concentrate all her energy and listen to every note of the song. This was undoubtedly an extremely cruel torture for Chu Luyue. Her whole body seemed to be cut in half. Half of her attention was focused on the music score in her hand, while the other half was constantly experiencing the bloody and terrible things. Finally, a stream of red blood slowly overflowed from the corner of her mouth. It dripped on the back of her hand. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1700. Chu Luyue reached out her other hand nonchalantly and quickly wiped away the drop of blood. And her eyes, from beginning to end, did not move away from the score. Although it was painful and difficult, she knew that this was the path she had chosen from the beginning. No matter what, she had to continue walking on her own. She finally finished reading the piece in her hand. Chu Luyue pursed her lips. Still not. But there was no disappointment on her face. She rubbed the piece a few times and threw it on the ground. The moment she finished reading it, the luster on it had already disappeared. At this moment, it was lying there quietly, no different from a piece of waste paper. Chu Luyue raised her hand without hesitation, picked up another piece, and continued reading. In fact, she was already prepared to flip through all the music scores here. Her only hope was that time could flow faster. When she didn't want to go out, decades had already passed outside. This thought flashed through her mind quickly, then she quickly suppressed it. Clang! The zither didn't stop. Cultivation didn't stop. Big brother? Uncle Luo Yen? Elder Wu Peng? Elder Bai Tong? In the dark and cramped space, Nandi's legs went weak. She slowly squatted down and hugged herself. Deep despair surged from the bottom of her heart and gradually drowned her. There was no response. Still no response. She couldn't remember how long she had been walking here, but she couldn't find the exit. She didn't know how many times she had shouted until her voice was hoarse, but she still didn't get any response. It was as if there was no one else here except for her. The surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. She could even hear her own breathing and heartbeat. This made her even more afraid. If she was trapped here for the rest of her life, what should she do? She didn't want to die yet. Nanny finally couldn't hold it in anymore and sobbed softly. And in the depths of her heart, her hatred for Chu Luiyue deepened. If it wasn't for that woman, how could she have fallen to such a state? Everything was fine at first, but ever since she met them, she had been unlucky. Now it was even more likely that he would have to throw his life away. She didn't know where the hell this place was. Ever since she was swallowed here, she had lost contact with everyone else. More importantly, he couldn't even send out a request for help here. Right now, her only hope was her father. But before that, even she wasn't sure if she could hold on. After crying for a while, Nanny was tired and sat down on the ground. However, as soon as she sat down, she felt something beneath her. She was shocked and screamed as she jumped up. Ah! Sharp screams reverberated in this silent space, seeming especially mournful and terrifying. Nanny hurriedly covered her mouth and looked at the ground in panic. When she saw what it was, she sucked in a breath of cold air and suddenly opened her eyes wide. That was actually half a bone, because most of the bones were buried underground, and the exposed part seemed to be broken from the middle. Nanny was unable to recognize what kind of bones they were. The only thing he could be sure of was that it belonged to a human cultivator. Also, the bone was lustrous, and one could tell at a glance that its owner's realm was not low when he was alive. But how could Nanny care about this now? She stared fixedly at the half of the white bone. Her mind was in a mess, and her mind was in a mess. Why was there such a bone here? She didn't notice it at all before. She didn't know who it belonged to. She had walked in the divine ruins for so long, and had never seen half a bone. Now wait. At this thought, Nanny's mind finally cleared up. No, there must be a problem here. She had traveled day and night in the divine ruins with Big Brother and the others. They had walked so far, and there was nothing but broken tombstones all over the ground. This was the first bone she had seen in the god-slaying tomb. But why would it appear here? She stared at the bone for a long time, and finally couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. Suddenly, a weak and hoarse voice entered her ears. "Let me out. I can take you out." Nanny's heart skipped a beat. She took 2 steps back and stared at the bone as if she had seen a ghost. "She was sure that your voice just now came from below. Who are you?" Because of fear, her voice trembled badly. After a pause, the voice sounded again. "You don't need to know. You just need to know that I can help you leave this place. Do you want to make this deal or not?" This tone was terrifyingly calm, but it also carried a force that made people unconsciously believe in it. Nanny tried her best to calm herself down. If I help you, can you guarantee that you won't hurt me after we get out?" The voice seemed to laugh. "You're not worthy of me doing it myself." It seemed that he didn't take Nanny seriously at all. Nanny was furious, but she didn't dare to flare up. On second thought, this person might really not be an ordinary person. "Since you don't like me, why ask me for help?" The other party was silent for a moment before saying, "Of course it's because you can help me. You can take out that thing around your neck and use it." Nanny's heart skipped a beat, and she subconsciously touched the chain around her neck. Only Father and Big Brother knew about this thing. How could he tell so easily? As if sensing her hesitation, the other party continued. "You have to know that without my help, you won't be able to get out even if you're trapped here for more than 100 years. These words finally made Nanny make up her mind. She gritted her teeth. "Okay, I'll help you. However, you have to keep your promise to me." As she spoke, she finally took off the chain around her neck. It was an ordinary-looking silver chain. It was very thin and decorated with a fingernail-sized ruby. It was dark red in color and pure in texture. Even if an ordinary person saw it, they would only think that it was an ordinary ruby necklace. Nanny held the ruby in her hand and closed her eyes. Soon, a totem flashed between her brows. A short sword suddenly flew out from the ruby. Its entire body was bright and extremely sharp. Nanny grabbed the short sword and dug it into the ground. A deep mark quickly appeared on the ground. Nanny didn't stop. After a while, the ground around the bone completely loosened. Swoosh! The bone suddenly darted out. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1701. Before Nan Yi could react, she suddenly felt a strong force attacking her. Immediately after, her body fell forward uncontrollably. At this moment, the darkness in front of her was suddenly cut open by a white light. She subconsciously closed her eyes. At this moment, her body suddenly fell. Outside the Scarlet Soul Forest, in the void, a few ripples suddenly spread out rapidly. Immediately after, a few figures walked out one after another. The person in front was dressed in a dark purple robe and had a cold expression. It was the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan. Behind him were 4 elders of the family. As soon as he arrived, Nan Yifan quickly scanned the surroundings and frowned. He sensed the aura of Nan Yi and the others. After looking for a while, he lifted his foot and walked towards a certain place in the Scarlet Soul Forest. They should have entered the Scarlet Soul Forest from here. The elders behind him hurriedly followed. Because they knew that this matter involved Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi, they didn't dare to say anything in front of Nan Yifan. They would do whatever he said. The few of them quickly rushed over. However, just as Nan Yifan and the others were about to enter, there was a sudden fluctuation behind them. They immediately looked back and were on high alert. Who would come to the Godslayer tomb at this time? And it was the same place as them. A black spatial crack was suddenly torn open. Then 2 figures walked out one after another. When he saw the faces of the people who came, Nan Yifan was stunned. Wasn't this the head of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Yi Zhao, and one of the 5 elders, Elder Yu? The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan almost never interacted with the human race. The reason why Nan Yifan could recognize them at a glance was because he had met them by chance in the past. Although it was only a one-time encounter, he had always remembered them clearly. So now that he saw these 2 familiar faces, he immediately remembered. Nan Yifan's hanging heart relaxed slightly, but at the same time, more questions arose. Why did they suddenly come to this place? There was no need to mention Elder Yu. But Yi Zhao rarely left the Phoenix God Mountain. Today, they had actually appeared together in the Scarlet Soul Forest outside the God-slaying tomb. It was hard not to overthink. However, no matter how he felt in his heart, he still had to put on a show. Nan Yifan quickly adjusted his expression, took a step forward, cupped his hands politely, and said with a smile, "Haha, isn't this Patriarch Yi Zhao? What wind blew you here?" Compared to his enthusiasm, Yi Zhao's attitude was much colder. He only glanced at Nan Yifan indifferently, then quickly retracted his gaze, as if he had not seen this person at all. He only turned his head and said to Elder Yu, "They should have entered from here." Elder Yu nodded. Of course, they would not mistake Dumpling's aura. But why would I bump into someone from the Nan family here? He looked in that direction out of the corner of his eye, but did not respond to Nan Yifan's words. What a joke. The patriarch had always been blunt with the human clan. Now that Dumpling had an accident, time was even more pressing. How could he be in the mood to exchange pleasantries with Nan Yifan? Yi Zhao Duo's attitude made Nan Yifan very embarrassed. The smile on his face stiffened for a moment, but soon returned to normal. In fact, he had expected such a reaction from the other party. After so many years, which of the 2 great ancient mythological beasts did not have their eyes on the top of their heads and were extremely arrogant? Although he was not convinced, the other party had such confidence, so he had to admit it. Nan Yifan had a noble status and was strong himself. For many years, it was almost always others who looked at him with disdain. There weren't many situations like this where he tried to curry favor with others, and was even rejected by them. If it were someone else, they might have been lying on the ground. But the other party was Yi Zhao. He really could not afford to offend him. Nan Yifan swallowed his anger, pretended nothing had happened, and continued to ask, "Patriarch Yi Zhao, are you also here to look for someone?" These words attracted Elder Yu's attention. He raised his eyebrows. Also, Nan Yifan's heart tightened, and he suddenly felt that he had misspoken. He had unconsciously said also. But thinking of the other party's identity, this matter did not seem to be a taboo. So what if they knew? Would Yi Zhao meddle in the affairs of the human clan? After thinking for a moment, Nan Yifan said frankly, Yes, my daughter came to the god-slaying tomb some time ago, but there was suddenly no news of her today. I was worried, so I wanted to come over and take a look myself. He only mentioned Nan Yi and did not mention Nan Yuxing and the others. This was a serious matter. If the news of Nan Yuxing's accident also spread, the Nan family would probably be in chaos. Anyway, everyone knew that he had always doted on Nan Yi, so it was normal for him to make a special trip here for her. A look of understanding flashed across Elder Yu's eyes, but he did not reply. Nan Yifan could not help but ask, "May I know who the two of you are here to look for? The god-slaying tomb is vast and full of danger. If we join forces, we might be able to find her faster?" Yes, he wanted to join forces with Yi Zhao. Although the other party was few in number, they were powerful. Moreover, it would be even better if he could use this opportunity to get closer to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. He had wishful thinking, but Yi Zhao was not interested at all. He didn't even spare her a glance, and with a cold and solemn expression on his face, he lifted his foot and walked towards the Scarlet Soul Forest. Nan Yifan was rebuffed, and his face was also a little embarrassed. But Yi Zhao was famous for his bad temper and arrogance. Even if he was angry, he did not dare to do anything to him. Besides, the most important thing now was to find Nan Yi and the others. Behind him, several elders secretly exchanged glances and did not dare to breathe loudly. Nan Yifan clenched his fists and took a deep breath. "All right, let's hurry up." After saying that, he lifted his foot and walked forward. As they walked, they all sensed that something was wrong. Nan Yifan's expression became more and more strange, and his footsteps became hesitant. This direction, why was it the same as Yi Zhao and the others? Almost at the same time, Elder Yu also turned around and looked at Nan Yifan with a faint smile. "Patriarch Nan, if you want to find someone, go ahead. Why do you have to go with us?" Nan Yifan felt embarrassed and braced himself to explain. "Elder Yu, it's really a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to follow you, but my daughter and the others seem to have entered the god-slaying tomb from here, so..." Seeing that he did not seem to be lying, Elder Yu glanced at Yi Zhao hesitantly. The Crimson Soul Forest was so big. Where could they not enter from? This was too much of a coincidence, wasn't it? Nan Yifan immediately realized something when he saw this reaction. "Patriarch Yi Zhao, maybe the person you are looking for went in with Yi and the others?" There was a trace of excitement in his expression. "I think it's more convenient for us to move together, don't you think?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.